Star Wars, Silver Oath. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201 Optimism. It was not until the footsteps of the mercenaries gradually faded away that the landlord outside the door snorted, turned his head and said, "Human girl, you are causing trouble for me again." Huang Zuan's lively voice also happened to sound. "What do you mean by causing trouble for me? Those mercenaries were not sent by me. I haven't held you accountable yet. When people introduced this house to me, they said that, although it is small and shabby, and the landlord is not easy to deal with, it is the safest place in District 5. As a result, they almost broke in just now." The landlord said in a deep voice, "No one can break my door." Huang Zuan said, yes, no one can break into your door, and no one can default on your rent." The legend of the red-faced man. I was tired of listening to the agent talking about it over and over again on the way to Lee. Otherwise, I would not have chosen your crappy place. Anyway, you did help me keep those ruffians out of the door. Although I suffered some danger in the process, I won't bother with you. I'll just say that you performed well. I will pay you the rent tomorrow. Humph. The landlord groaned in dissatisfaction, but didn't say much, and walked away slowly with heavy steps. Then, Huang Zuan let out a long breath, opened the door, and came to Xiaoen with a bowl of steaming porridge in one hand, smiling. "Didn't scare you?" Looking at Huang Zuan's sincere smile, Xin quietly retracted the lightsaber in his hand and said, "It's a bit unexpected." After a pause, Xin asked again, "If I stay here, it will cause you a lot of trouble." "It's no trouble." Huang Zuan interrupted, "They have been humiliated once, and they won't come again easily. The red-faced man is still very intimidating here. I originally thought that the agent was bragging, but it seems that the reputation is well deserved. I'm not referring to those mercenaries, but the landlord himself. He should know that I'm here, right?" Huang Zuan said, "Well, the landlord knows every one of his properties. I dragged you back from the hub and hid you at home. I could hide it from other people on the road, but I couldn't hide it from the landlord. But he won't interfere. Compared with harboring criminals, his tenants have done many more excessive things. Come to think of it, why did you come here and become a wanted criminal with wounds all over your body?" Xin could only say, "It's hard to explain." "What about you? Why did you come here?" Huang Zuan answered excitedly, "Because there are many opportunities here. Although the Silver Knights arranged jobs for us in Zun before, it was obviously a novice benefit with mediocre content and income. I don't know how long it will take to pay off the debt with the salary of a tavern waiter." Xin was surprised. "Debt? Li Yu also arranged debt for you?" Huang Zuan said, "Yes, but it is reasonable. We are a group of strangers who came to the hometown of the Silver Knights. We have to rely on others for food, clothing, housing and transportation. We can't let others pay for nothing." Xin opened his mouth, but still had nothing to say. Although he spent a huge amount of money to persuade the teammates of the Red Apricot team to help rescue these people, the money was only used to save people temporarily, not for life. When Huang Zuan and others arrived safely in the wasteland, Xin's contract with his teammates ended. After that, Li Yu's placement of these survivors was another matter. "And I think having debts is a good thing," Huang Zuan said as she stuffed the bowl of porridge into Xin's hand. "Most of our group of survivors can't accept the huge gap between reality and reality. They are in a daze all day long. If there is no debt pressure, I'm afraid they will die mentally in less than 3 or 5 days. Now at least they can live to pay off debts." Huang Zuan laughed as she spoke. "People like me who speak for creditors are generally labeled as scabs, right? So I couldn't stay in Zun anymore. People around me treated me as a monster or even a traitor. They united to squeeze me and found the meaning of survival. Although I was very happy to see them cheer up, I felt a little uncomfortable being stuck in the crowd. It happened that there was a business of dispatching workers at that time, so I came to Lee. Here, I'm mainly responsible for taking over the job of a previous liaison officer, doing miscellaneous work for the Knight's import and export trade in the Xianhuang district. But because I'm a newcomer, and I'm in the Xianhuang district, although the salary is higher than being a waiter in the Wasteland district, it is not much higher, so I can only live frugally, and the intermediary responsible for contacting here recommended the Redface man to me. Oh, Redface is his nickname. He is a Clatuinian, and is called Redface because of his red skin. It is said that he has a close relationship with the Hutts, and is very popular in Li. Although he is only a landlord, no one in the entire Xianhuang district dares to offend him. The group of mercenaries just now are newcomers, and don't know the rules. The real old hands know to avoid the Red Face's house. Huang Zuan's experience, although only a few words, made Xin speechless. The girl who was timid at the beginning, has become positive and optimistic, and bravely stepped into the Xianhuang district to explore. This is simply the best portrayal of rebirth from the ashes. And this also made the apprentice who was determined to save people at the time feel very relieved. With this feeling, after Xin took a mouthful of the mixed stew, he felt a strong flavor spreading in his mouth. It was quite different from the mellow and rich taste of the mixed stew in Xiangsuan district's Shuaishan. It was a strong taste that stimulated people to almost lose consciousness. Are you not used to it? But this is actually the specialty food of this street. It is very popular. It is said that even people from Xiangsuan district used to come here specifically to eat it. The Lamo man who made the mixed stew earned a small courtyard in District 1 with this, and he lived freely for a while. Later, he became addicted to gambling and lost the courtyard, so he came back to practice his old skills again. Huang Zuan, with a bit of teasing, also took out a spoon and scooped a spoonful of thick meat paste into her mouth. Then her whole body trembled and let out a long series of painful moans. But after she swallowed the meat paste, she relaxed her expression, wiped the sweat off her face, and said, I always tell myself that when I like this thing, I will be a qualified local. Xin couldn't help laughing, and he also picked up the spoon and swallowed it. To be honest, although the taste of this mixed porridge is a bit special, compared with the customary delicacies he experienced when he followed his master to travel around the country, the cooking skills of the Lamo people are still approachable. He was just a little stimulated by the first bite. Once he was mentally prepared, this nutritious food was the best delicacy for him who was seriously injured and continuing to recover. While Xin was feasting, Huang Zuan asked, what about you? What are you doing here? Does the Red Apricot team have a new mission in Li? Xin was silent for a while and said, no, I acted on my own this time, and I also implicated many people for this. Really? But I must have saved a lot of people, right? Huang Zuan said as a matter of course, which made Xin feel a lot of emotion. Chapter 202 A Matter of Time. Xin reflected on what he had done. Did you save many people? Maybe, he killed Xiaozi desperately and indirectly saved many people. However, this kind of logic, that killing equals saving lives challenges the GD philosophy, making it difficult for people to happily say, kill well, kill more. In fact, purely from a utilitarian point of view, he should not have left Zun from the beginning, let alone be involved in the subsequent series of disturbances. Although he had many reasons to leave at the time, in essence, he was succumbing to one impulse. But now that he is trapped in the space city, he seems to be close to his master, but in fact he is far away. If he wanted to continue to complete his mission to the galaxy, he would have to work twice as hard as the price of his impulse. Xin's silence made Huang Zuan curious, but at this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Huang Zuan stood up quickly and threw a torn blanket to Xin. Xin quickly put down the porridge bowl and lifted the blanket to cover herself. Huang Zuan opened the creaking sliding door and greeted the visitors outside with a smile. Oh, it's you. What's the matter? I'm here to remind you not to get into trouble. A rather sharp man's voice sounded outside the door, with a thick nasal voice when speaking, and he was not even fluent in Kyankan language. Next to the man, another vague female voice came. This time we are serious about searching for criminals. I don't care whether you are hiding people or not, at least don't be caught. If something happens, we are here. Everyone on the street will be implicated by you. Huang Zuan laughed and said, I'm a new guy. How dare I cause trouble? You'll have to kill me. That's good, Pululu. As he spoke, He made a long series of nose-blowing sounds. There's something else I want to remind you. You have been selected as a representative of this street. Huang Zuan was confused. Representative? What do you mean? Image. Is there any advertising income? The woman mocked vaguely. What a beautiful idea. What kind of spokesperson does this dirty place need? If you want an endorsement, try to go to Xiangsuan district. The man said. A long string of nasal sounds interrupted the ridicule of his companion, and said, "It seems that you don't know. Then let me tell you. The so-called representative means the unlucky guy who suffers on behalf of this street. If things don't go smoothly this time, for example, the person above never found the culprit, and finally the person was held accountable in Xianhuang district, and on our street. Then, if the real culprit is not found, you are the real culprit." Huang Zuan made unbelievable expression. Wait, who is the real culprit? I didn't do anything. So you are the representative. Otherwise do you expect others to jump out and take responsibility? Puff. Lulu, you still have time to run away now. The red-faced tenant should have this opportunity. After saying that, the man and woman left, and Huang Zuan had a wry smile on her face when she returned to the house. Did you hear it all? Well, no wonder people here keep telling me that they met Puxan people, original race, male flying creatures about 50 centimeters in length, with unusually large noses and well-developed lungs. The female is a humanoid creature about 1.5 meters tall, cannot fly, looks very bloated, and cannot speak clearly. Must be up to no good. Every time he takes his partner to send a notice, there are a lot of complaints. Oh, no wonder. The income here is high, but no one wants to come. The work in Xianhuang District 5 is really not easy, and I was chosen as a sacrifice just a few days ago. Xin said, I'm sorry for causing you trouble. Yeah. Huang Zuan couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and said in surprise, huh? Don't say sorry. I'm not complaining. Just stay here and recover. There's nothing to worry about. I mean, the so-called representative will only push me out when the upper management has been held accountable all the way and no one takes the blame. But things usually don't get to that point. Xin said, you don't have to comfort me. I'm not trying to comfort you. Huang Zuan said, although I haven't been here long, and I just learned about the representative system, believe me, I have a general understanding of the rules of the slums in District 5. Although this place has always been looked down upon by the people above, it is actually very united and very energetic, especially when fighting against superiors. Huang Zuan said, pointing to the top of her head. In fact, according to the architectural structure of Li, Xiangsuan District and Xianhuang District are basically at the same height, and there is no relationship between them. However, the hierarchical relationship that exists in the social structure and the chain of contempt is clear at a glance. The people in Xianhuang District are really miserable, especially in slums like District 5, where even ill thought out light doesn't shine through. Not to mention other public resources, water, and power outages are common. Sometimes the garbage trucks from Xiangsuan District come to dump the garbage directly. The people at the top have always treated the people here as cattle, so the animals naturally don't treat the people above as humans. Don't look at it just now. Those mercenaries show off their power and make this place a mess, but if any mercenary from Xiangsuan District dares to come and show off, everyone will immediately unite and speak out unanimously. At this point, Huang Zuan also laughed, so you don't have to worry. The people above are the ones who issued the search warrant this time. I'm afraid the people here only think you are a hero and will not take the initiative to let you out. Huang Zuan's smiling face in this dark and damp metal shack seemed particularly valuable, but Xin couldn't accept this rhetoric. He shook his head and said, the risk still exists. You can't place too much hope on this kind of bottom level unity. It is too fragile. While traveling with Master Mostima, Xin had already I've seen too much unity fall apart. The kind of clique formed by poverty and oppression will fall apart as long as the environment changes slightly. For example, as long as a few units of housing in Xiangsuan District are promised, at least half of the people in the entire street will become traitors on the spot. But now it's just that the rulers haven't offered a high enough price. But it's only a matter of time. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203 approaching. Don't worry, I certainly won't pin my hopes on the environment. I just want to say that the situation is not that bad. Just rest assured and recover. You saved me before, now it's my turn to save you. Scene said, I'm not doing this to make you. Me neither. Huang Zuan interrupted briskly. Okay, I'm going to work. As a new employee, you must perform well to get a promotion and a raise. You can take some snacks from the cabinet at noon, and I'll bring you supper at night and see if I can find some medicine. After saying that, Huang Zuan carried a worn-out second-hand backpack and ran and jumped all the way away. Looking at the woman's back as she walked away, Scene felt a heavy pressure. It was indeed a pleasant surprise to meet someone who was willing to lend a hand to him when he was seriously injured and in desperate situation. But what was the result of the last pleasant surprise? The appearance of Dr. Wang Yi's tragic death in Xianhuang District 3 was still clearly presented in the mind of the Jedi apprentice. Scene couldn't even feel the joy of surviving the disaster, and the pressure in his heart just became heavier and heavier as time went by. There is no theory that good people will definitely be rewarded in this world. Moreover, for the current space city, it is doubtful whether Scene is a good person. In the eyes of most normal people, the Jedi apprentice who caused the riot is just a lawless wanted criminal. What he did in Xiangsa Nudong almost trampled on all local public security regulations, so he is naturally an unforgivable evil person. Scene is an evil person, so those who help Scene are naturally evil people. In a world where good people are not rewarded, the fate of evil people will not be good. Huang Zuan picked up the big evil Scene from the garbage dump at the transportation hub and took him home. The high risk she took is self-evident. Scene really didn't want to implicate a kind and optimistic girl. But now he is lying in Huang Zuan's room, and the dirty blood oozing from the wound not only soaked the sheets, but also rubbed the edges and corners everywhere during the transportation. If he doesn't want to implicate Huang Zuan, he has to blind the eyes of everyone in the space city. Therefore, even though Scene really wanted to leave and hide his achievements and fame, he still lay in bed and recovered. Looking at the rusty ceiling and listening to the gradually resurrected noise outside the house, Scene's mood also calmed down. Since it has come, we should make the best of it. Anger, impatience, depression. These negative emotions do not help to change the status quo, but only make people vulnerable. Lying in bed, Scene couldn't help but recall the various experiences he had after coming to Lee. The process of struggling against adversity was not smooth, but most of the time his choices and judgments followed reason and he did not make any mistakes. Until Wang Yi died tragically in front of him. Even though it has been a while since the incident, whenever Scene recalled the doctor's smile before his death, he would still feel a pain in his heart, and uncontrollable negative emotions would surge. Fortunately, the rationality at this time was enough to suppress these emotions, allowing Scene to examine his original judgment more calmly. Rationally speaking, the judgment at that time was not wise. It is true that stopping Xiaozi's unscrupulous murderer was imminent, but Scene did not have the conditions to stop him at that time. At that time, the right place, and right people were all not on Scene's side. He even lost his lightsaber, and his connection with the Force seemed to be unstable, so that he would rely more on his subjective judgment rather than the guidance of the Force. At that time, he rushed forward alone with the determination to die, but he almost stopped outside the Jade building. Fortunately, Xia Jiang changed sides at the last minute, but Scene did not regret his decision at that time. Even if time was reversed, and he started over again, his choice would not change. And in the end, he achieved his goal perfectly. Scene personally pierced Xiaozi's chest with a lightsaber, and witnessed Xiaozi lying on the ground, his life passing away rapidly until he died, and that was enough. As for his own affairs, Scene did not care much. He had long been aware of dying together with the enemy. This life was purely picked up, and every minute and every second he spent now was just playing with his residual heat. Of course, as long as the person is not dead, even if there is only a trace of ember left, SYN will do his best to burn. And now what he has to do is to recover from his injuries as soon as possible and escape from the city without involving Huangzuan. Then, go back to Zun to apologize. After all, he owed Li Yu too much this time. It was fine that he left Zun without saying goodbye, but when he arrived at Xiangsuanyudang, Li Yu sent his men to risk their lives to rescue him. After that, whether he continued to look for opportunities to reunite with his master, or continue to investigate Nanhela's death and the truth behind it in the Kyan star system, Li Yu's help was indispensable. Therefore, SYN simply couldn't imagine how much his debt would expand to. The worst case scenario might be that he would work overtime, but couldn't even pay the interest. And just as SYN's thoughts were gradually drifting away, a burst of hurried footsteps outside the door caught his attention. SYN immediately became alert, and his muscles tensed up. Because this kind of footsteps was too familiar to SYN now. It was the crisp sound of alloy boots trampling on the hard stone ground, dense and orderly. Just by the sound, one could outline the outline of a group of elite soldiers in one's mind. They were a group of absolutely well-trained soldiers, completely different from the miscellaneous soldiers, who had just caused chaos on the street. Even through the door, SYN could feel a chill. This chill seemed familiar. Not long ago, when SYN was dragged by Kyo Yankang to escape from Xiangsuanyudang, and was about to take an airship to completely leave the scene, such a chill suddenly descended. There was no need to say more about what happened next. Dragon Hunter. SYN whispered to himself. He didn't know why he was noticed by the Dragon Hunter. Logically, everyone was hostile to the Blue Dragon. But at this time, there was no need to care about the other party's intentions. The Jedi apprentice's right hand quietly grasped the lightsaber at his waist. Fortunately, he finally did not lose his weapon again this time. Outside the door, a serious and low male voice resounded through the street in an unquestionable tone. Searching for prisoners. No one is allowed to interfere. This time, there were no shouts of arrogance, no sounds of guns colliding, and no cries. The originally noisy streets were, as if frozen by the cold, and were silent. The only sound on the street was the slow, but firm footsteps of the dragon hunters. SYN clenched his right hand a little tighter. The terrifying deterrent power of the dragon hunters was completely different from that of the previous miscellaneous soldiers. Although the number of dragon hunters was small, they were more terrifying than tens of thousands of rabble. The people in the slums knew this very well. So they dared to cry to the previous vagrants, but held their breath in front of the dragon hunters, fearing that they would anger them. Just as the dragon hunters began to disperse and search, a slightly old voice sounded. Captain, according to the feedback from those mercenaries, this place has just been searched once, and no criminals were found. I know. Although they are miscellaneous soldiers, they are undoubtedly more familiar with this chaotic grassroots environment than outsiders like us. Our numbers are limited, and it is impossible for us to search every corner of the space city by ourselves. That's right, so I don't intend to overturn the conclusions of those miscellaneous soldiers. They may not be good at other things, but they should be good at finding a criminal with a sky-high bounty. The old dragon hunter was a little puzzled. In that case, those miscellaneous soldiers only claimed that they had searched the street, but they didn't say that they searched every corner. The captain said, you must listen carefully to what these miscellaneous soldiers say. Their captain said when reporting the results that he found nothing. But at the same time, there were people whispering below, saying that they must give the red-faced man who is in the way a good lesson later. The old man was silent for a while, and said, so what do you mean, Captain? The captain did not answer the old man's question, but turned his head and said loudly to the people on the street, where is the red-faced man's house? You answer. The person the dragon hunter captain named was a short Kentian who was selling groceries on the street. This race living around the Kyan galaxy is famous for its agility, red braids that always drag on the ground, and cowardly character. The Kentian almost suffocated in the face of the dragon hunter's intimidation, and the red braids tightly wrapped around his ankles. That was the reaction of the Kentian when he was extremely scared. A shrill voice squeezed out of his throat, and he was shrouded in fear for a long time, and the Kentian was unable to form a complete sentence. The dragon hunter captain was not in a hurry, but just waited patiently for a long time, until the Kentian's cold sweat had evaporated naturally, and the braids on his ankles also relaxed due to fatigue. His voice finally calmed down, and he could speak normally. Over there, the metal shed that is half underground. Okay. The dragon hunter captain got the result, and he did not doubt him, and immediately led the team to approach. Chapter 204 Hero. Scene listened to the rapidly approaching footsteps, slowly stood up from the bed, and prepared for the battle. Although his physical condition was far from enough to support him to fight a group of elite soldiers, his fighting spirit was already burning. However, before the battle, a deep voice suddenly interrupted. "No one can break into my house." Scene was startled when he heard this voice. "Clatuin people. He is here again." The captain of the dragon hunters was also surprised by the sudden appearance of the red-skinned strong man in front of him. He stopped and said in a deep voice, "Are you the red-faced man? We are dragon hunters, and we are ordered to search for prisoners. It has nothing to do with me." The Clatuin man shook his head, not showing any weakness. "No one can break into my house." Okay. The captain of the dragon hunters did not intend to waste time talking to this strong man in the slums, and immediately raised the muzzle of the gun and aimed at him. However, at this moment, a team member's voice came from not far away. "Captain, we found the target's bloodstains." The captain turned his head and saw his men waving a handheld blood tester, which displayed the test results with a solid holographic image. It was exactly the same as the target's characteristics. He should have gone over there. The men pointed to the street next door. "The bloodstains are going in that direction, and there is a smuggling channel connected to the Shiangsuan district over there." The captain whispered, "So, he is not here?" The old man behind him sighed. "The mob that came to search here before are really useless. They can't even find such obvious traces." The captain's eyes were still fixed on the Clatuin people, and he said, "It's not surprising. With the red-faced man on the scene to deter, those useless people must have accomplished nothing." After a pause, the captain said again, "But I'm still curious, what is in the only house on this street that has not been broken into?" However, at this moment, the communicator on the captain's helmet came with a slight beep, and after a moment, he showed a surprised expression. "The employer suddenly asked us to go back." "Never mind, let's stop here today. One group will follow the direction of the bloodstains and investigate. The others will follow me to see if the employer has any other requirements outside the contract." Soon, accompanied by a neat sound of footsteps, the group of dragon hunters who suddenly appeared dispersed. Seen half crouched beside the bed, feeling that this change came too fast, unexpectedly, and even a little unbelievable. The dragon hunters' retreat was reasonable. They found new clues that pointed to a completely new direction. At the same time, the employer also asked them to go back. But this was too coincidental. After experiencing this series of encounters with Lee, Scene did not trust coincidences. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, the door was suddenly knocked. Scene was startled because he did not hear anyone walking to the door. It was really unusual for someone to be able to hide from the ears of the Jedi apprentice at such a close distance. "Well, don't be afraid, it's me." The shrill voice of the Kentian came from outside the door. "You should have heard the conversation just now. They won't let it go. We must think of a way." As he spoke, the Kentian pushed open the door, as if the door lock had never existed, and walked over with a brisk pace. This small creature will wrap its feet with its long braids when walking, making its footsteps silent. As the Kentian approached, Scene directly showed his cautious attitude. He lowered his body and stared at the other party. The Kentian hurriedly shook his head. "Don't get me wrong, no one here will hurt you." Scene remained calm. He couldn't trust the other party so much. Although the Kentian did not show hostility, it was not purely kind. If they wanted to harm you, they would have just told the dragon hunters about you. In fact, not only did I not tell them, I also sent someone to lure them away with a little blood. Scene thought about how he had fought all the way to Lee, and his blood was probably all over the streets and alleys. He didn't care about it and said lightly, "Thank you." The Kenshinran showed goodwill, but the reason for the goodwill was not sufficient, which made Scene still unable to trust him. Why would he offend the dragon hunters to help him? This was completely unreasonable for the people in the slums. The Kenshinran said, I heard that you blew up the Shyangsuan Jade building and killed many people inside, so many of us think you are a hero. Scene almost lost his breath. This reason really made people unable to find fault. The internal contradictions of Li have never been a secret. People living in the Shyangsuan district and the Xianhuang district are like different species, and they can't even understand each other. To the upper class, the slums are like a stinking mud pond. To the poor, the powerful class symbolized by the Xiangsuan Yudong is simply a group of greedy parasites. Although Scene's actions in the Xiangsuan Yudong trampled on the law and harmed innocent people, the people in the slums may think that Scene's trampling was not cruel enough and did not harm enough. Even the red-faced man admits that you are a good man, Kentain said, otherwise he would not allow Huang Zuan to bring an inexplicable person into his house. Scene then said, so, you knew it from the beginning? At least the red-faced man knew it a long time ago. Kentain said, on this street, people may not care about each other, but they will definitely care about their own property. And no one cares more about his houses than the red-faced man. As he spoke, the Kentain loosened his braids, revealing 2 wide soles of his feet, which made a snapping sound when he walked. This was the Kentain's greatest act of kindness. For these tiny races, swiftness and stealth are the key to ensuring survival, and it is also an instinct engraved in their blood and bones. Actions that attract attention are only done in front of people you absolutely trust. Scene was silent for a while, then said, I'm Scene. I'm Hupo. Kenshinran extended his large furry hand in a friendly manner. Nice to meet you, but I suggest you find a way out as soon as possible. This street is too small to protect you for too long. Those dragon hunters have set their sights on you, and they will never give up until they find you. After saying that, Kenshinran blinked his innocent big eyes at Scene. Scene ignored him, but looked down at him with an indifferent look. Kenshinran subconsciously turned his head away, not daring to look Scene in the eye again. He only said with an awkward smile, but there's no rush. You can just rest here and recuperate for the next few days. If you need anything, just let Huang Zuan tell me. She doesn't know that her little secret has been exposed yet, and she might be shocked then. Chapter 205 Too troublesome. Huang Zuan was indeed shocked. What? They all know? The woman who had just returned from work was frightened into a stone puppet by Scene's words as soon as she entered the house. The bag of poor man's fruit she bought from the vegetable stall also rolled to the ground. How could this happen? Huang Zuan was already trembling all over while she was talking. In a moment, the rotten leaf raspberry, frozen, Kanioan chicken breast, and Shenshukan rice in her hand were shaken off one by one. GD apprentices who advocate simplicity and pure cultivation hate this kind of waste the most. Even if these are just cheap processed products in the slums, they are still food that can fill the stomach. Scene dragged his sick body and struggled to get off the bed. He pulled a relatively clean bedside towel, picked up the groceries on the ground one by one, and wiped them clean. Huang Zuan couldn't help but anxiously said, is this the time to do this? Be patient. Do you want to eat salad? Scene weighed the ingredients in his hand and began to think about the dishes. The cooking conditions in the slums are limited, and there is not much room for creativity, but as long as you are willing, you can still make simple and delicious dishes. Huang Zuan was so angry at Scene's surprisingly calm attitude that she was speechless. She stood in the middle of the room, staring at Scene busying himself, wiping the ingredients clean, and doing simple processing. When Scene pried open the hard shell of the poor man's fruit with his bare hands, he neatly took out the seeds that were as fine as gravel, leaving only the flesh. Huang Zuan finally confirmed that the young man in front of her was really fearless. Aren't you worried that they are lying to you? Scene smiled. I'm worried. Maybe they treat me as a hero in their mouths, but they are on the road of informing on others behind their backs. Then why are you still so leisurely? It's better than being in a panic. Even if I will be surrounded by heavy troops later, I hope that I will have filled my stomach when I break through. No, I want to go and test the waters. Huang Zuan couldn't accept this attitude of waiting for death and couldn't help but turn around and go out. Don't be impatient. Scene stop to Ungzuan. Who are you going to ask? The Clatuan people. Of course he is. What are you going to say? Why did you tell others that I was harboring a wanted criminal? Ungzuan was speechless. Or you can ask the Kentian people. How did you know that I was harboring a wanted criminal? Ungzuan finally stopped and sat down at the dining table weakly, saying, so just wait. Scene said, of course not, just wait. So how do you cook this deep water ice? I've never seen it before. Just wash it and eat it raw. Forget it, I'll help you pick the vegetables. It's very troublesome to deal with the leaves of rotten leaf berries. With the help of Ungzuan, several simple but hearty salads were quickly placed on the dining table, but before the two of them started eating, there was a knock on the door. Then, without waiting for Ungzuan to open the door, Hubo, a Kentian person, pushed the door open and walked in. The door lock that Ungzuan had hung seemed to be non-existent. Sorry to bother you at this time, but I can't stay outside the door for long, or someone will see me, Hubo said as he loosened the braids on his feet, making them snap as he walked. Then he put down the huge backpack on his back, revealing large pieces of fresh meat and colorful fruits and vegetables. They were all rare and precious ingredients in the slums. This is a little gift from me on behalf of the neighbors. It seems to be a little late. Hubo glanced at the salad on the table, but it should still be in time to add a dish now. Ungzuan hesitated and turned her eyes to Scene. Scene wiped his mouth calmly and said, welcome, and thank you for the medicine. I really need it urgently. Hubo's face froze, and then he took out the fresh meat and vegetables from his backpack, revealing a medical kit at the bottom. How did you know I brought this? Scene said, because I thought you wouldn't make a special trip just to deliver vegetables. Hearing this, Hubo couldn't help but stroke his braids with his big palm, but soon put his hand down again. Kent usually only has this habit of touching his braids when he is extremely nervous, and his action is undoubtedly a confession. Scene smiled. It's okay, let's talk business, I'm listening. Hubo sighed and said frankly, I need your help with two things. The first is a topic mentioned before. Our small street can't accommodate a big shot like you. Ungzuan couldn't help but interrupt. If you don't come, no one will know he is here. Hubo shook his head. You underestimate the slums. It is true that when you brought Scene back that day, most people on this street knew nothing, but at least the red-faced man knew, and I know it too, so there must be more people who know. So will you tell on him? I won't, but I can't guarantee that others won't. I said before that many people on this street regard him as a hero. But not all people in the slums admire heroes. Many people only admire the rewards of heroes. Can't you control them? Ungzuan asked. The Kentian couldn't help but laugh, revealing 2 rows of thick, vegetarian teeth. How can a mere Kentian control them? When you came here to settle down, I reminded you not to cause trouble. Did you listen? You didn't even look at me straight in the eye. Ungzuan was speechless. When she first arrived, her attention was attracted by the group of tall and ferocious looking residents. How could she care about a little thing that was only as tall as her waist? She didn't know at the time that this unprepossessing street vendor was actually one of the rulers of this street. There are no so-called rulers on this street. I can't do it, the red-faced man can't do it, the Puxan couple can't do it, and the lone Wikii can't do it, so don't expect us to control anyone. Besides, this matter does not only depend on the attitude of the street. He has provoked a real troublemaker. Scene nodded slightly when he heard this. Dragon Hunters, although he had never heard of this name before, after 2 brief contacts, this group of elite mercenaries, who were almost as elite as the silver mercenaries, had left a very deep impression on Scene. Hubo said, I used his blood to lure them away once before, but that was a scam after all. Once they tracked them down and found nothing, they would definitely be more suspicious of this street. And when they come again, they will not fall for the same trick again. Scene said, so for the people on this street, my not leaving is the real trouble. Ken said, although I don't want to say it so bluntly, it is the truth. We respect the heroes who blew up the Shiangsa when Udang, but respect cannot be eaten. Ungzuan couldn't help asking, since you think he is troublesome, wouldn't it be better to report him? I know. You dare not offend those mercenaries, and you also dare not offend a terrorist who can blow up the Shiangsa when you done, right? Chapter 206 Lead the way. Facing the indignant Huang Zuan, Hubo showed a helpless expression, and the braids on the back of his head began to swing left and right. Yes, we really dare not offend a big shot who blew up the Shiangsa and Jade building so hard that the earth shook. You can understand it this way. Anyway, please take our sincerity into consideration and heal your wounds as soon as possible and go far away. Huang Zuan was a little angry, but she didn't know what to be angry about. The people in the slums have never been obliged to take care of Sin. It is already a great kindness to not be a traitor. As for admiring heroes, this kind of spiritual pursuit is too luxurious for people struggling on the survival line. Sin said, Hubo, what will you do after I leave? Kent was surprised and asked, Yes, if they can catch me after I leave, then everything will be over. But what if they don't catch me? For them, my whereabouts will depend on you. How will you face those troublesome people then? A gloom appeared on Hubo's small face. That's right. The big shots in the upper echelons will always attribute their incompetence to their subordinates. If they can't find you, they will definitely vent their anger on us. By then, not only Huang Zuan, but all the big shots on our street will die. I'm afraid only the red-faced man will be able to get away with it. He used to rent houses to troublesome people, but he never got into trouble himself. Unfortunately, he never helped others solve problems. Sin said, so, you say you want to drive me away, but what you are most afraid of is that I will really leave. So as soon as you realize something is wrong, you rush to check on me, for fear that I'm in too good a condition, and will leave as soon as I say. Hubo opened his mouth and said embarrassedly, so you saw it from the beginning. Huang Zuan suddenly woke up and said in surprise, wait, if that's the case, then what is he doing here now? If he doesn't want you to leave, why would he be so kind to give you the medicine? Scene, you better be careful, there may be something fishy in the medicine. Not that serious. Scene opened the medicine box and took a look and said, people here won't joke about precious medicines. When Hubo heard this, the braid on the back of his head trembled, as if Scene's words resonated with him. So, with such a sincere gift, what do you need me to do? Scene said, time is running out, we can be more honest. Hubo sighed, to be honest, we certainly hope you can go and fall into the trap and save us the trouble. But I don't think you will accept this condition, so what do you want to do? As I said before, this street is too small to protect you. Scene said, I understand, even if you are willing to protect me, you can't guarantee that other people on the street. However, Scene had just said half of his words when he heard a sharp whistle from Hubo's braid. Kent reached out and took out a delicate communicator from it and heard an extremely dangerous warning. They are coming again. They are. After a scream, the sound in the communicator stopped abruptly. Hubo immediately turned off the communicator in fear and looked at Scene with a pale face. At the same time, the iconic orderly footsteps of the dragon hunters were heard outside the house. Compared to the last time, the number of dragon hunters was much smaller, only 5 in total, but when these 5 fully armed elite mercenaries appeared in the street in a neat formation, they had an overwhelming presence. The leader of this group of dragon hunters was an Icto who was much taller than the average and incredibly strong. He had a huge scar on his neck, which destroyed more than half of his breathing tube, making him speak unclearly and with a very strong accent. However, his voice was clearly heard by everyone. Thanks to your previous trick, a group of people wasted half a day to track down a row of fake bloodstains. Now, it's time for you to pay the price for your cleverness. Within 10 minutes, I want to see the person on the wanted list, otherwise all of you here will be charged with harboring a criminal. After saying that, the Nikto leaned the heavy electric staff on the ground, and a huge gap was immediately knocked out of the rusty metal floor. The discharge device at the end of the staff handle then burst out countless arcs of electricity, spreading out along the dense cables to the surroundings. Bang, bang, bang. Various electrical appliances on the street exploded one after another like a fireworks festival, and the crowd immediately screamed in a series of pain, but the 5 dragon hunters on the street were indifferent. In the room, Huang Zuan was extremely worried, her eyes wandering back and forth between Scene and Hubo, worried that Scene would not be able to help but stand up, and also worried that Hubo would betray Scene. Of course, she was more worried that the dragon hunters outside the door really did atrocities in the slums. After all, in the story she had heard, the upper circles of Li really did not treat the people of Xianhuang District 5 as human beings. Now, she could only pray that the stories she had heard before were exaggerated. In silence, Scene stood up and said regretfully, "It seems that this meal cannot be finished." Before he finished speaking, Hubo jumped up and pressed Scene's shoulders, trying to push him back to his seat. Kent, who was of small stature, could not resist the power of the Jedi apprentice and was thrown to the table, but his will was clearly conveyed to Scene. "What's wrong?" Scene asked. "Don't go out," Hubo said in a deep voice. "Please leave it to us." "You?" Scene was puzzled. "How are you going to deal with it?" "Of course, use the slum method. We only have one method." After speaking, Hubo took out the communicator and said, "This person is one of us, so let's do what we should do." The next moment, an unclear and sharp voice came from the street. "I know where he went. You guys follow me." In the room, Huang Zuan's eyes widened in disbelief, because she could clearly hear that it was the voice of the Puxan people. "What does he want to do?" Hubo shook his head and said to Huang Zuan, "He should come to inform you about the representative today, right? Remember, you owe him a favor." Huang Zuan was confused. "What did you say?" Hubo put his finger on his lips. "Don't talk." At the same time, outside the room, the Nikto people looked up in disbelief at the Puxan people who dared to fly a little higher than him. "You said you know where he went?" The Nikto muttered in a low voice and brought the electric staff closer to the Puxan. The dazzling electric sparks made the Puxan's face extremely pale. However, the Puxan was not afraid at all. He flapped his wide flesh wings and muttered, "Of course I know. I saw him escape with my own eyes." The Nikto was silent for a while and said, "Okay, you lead the way, but you should know the price of playing tricks." After that, several dragon hunters followed the Puxan into a deep alley. Chapter 207 Expectations for Friends. Listening to the retreating footsteps of the dragon hunter, Huang Zuan said in disbelief, "What on earth is he doing?" Hubo said, "Perform the responsibilities of a representative. Before you, he was the previous street representative. When the street met when trouble comes, representatives need to step up and make sacrifices for everyone. Of course I know the representative system. I want to ask him why he did this. Is it just because of Scene?" Said, "I'm also very curious. For you, protecting a stranger like me is not worth the loss. Is it not worth a loss?" Hubo sighed. "It is indeed not worth the loss, but the people in the slums are not qualified to care. What are the gains and losses? If you have the patience, you might as well listen to me tell a little story. I'm not a native of Kyan Galaxy. I came to Li with all my assets more than 10 years ago because I heard that this is one of the most prosperous trading ports in the surrounding galaxies, and it is also a rare window open to outsiders in the prosperous Kyan Galaxy. Objectively speaking, Li is indeed a good place for traveling merchants like me. It is an absolute paradise. But even in paradise, there are exceptions, and I'm that unlucky one. I have been operating here for 5 years and finally have my own shop in Xianxuan District 7. For the lower level traveling merchants, it was like having their own home on a lonely journey. However, less than a year later, my store went bankrupt. Huang Zuan asked, "Why?" "Because my main bank." Suddenly he said that he wanted to recover all the loans, and my capital chain was at its most tense at that time. Hubo shrugged. "After the store went bankrupt, I was saddled with unimaginable debts. Even if I was killed, I couldn't afford it. I had no choice but to come to Xianhuang District 5, and then I would never have a chance to come back." Scene asked, "Did you offend anyone?" "It has nothing to do with me offending anyone. Because I accepted funding from a person when I opened the store, and that person was said to have been completely blocked by the superiors because of a medical dispute. All financial transactions related to him were also forcibly cut off. I was simply implicated." Scene moved his lips, wanting to ask a question, but finally swallowed the question. "Because that answer no longer matters." Hubo added, "To me, it was a pure disaster." When I received the funding, he was still a famous star doctor in Nirvana. His investment was more valuable than pure money, and the funding process there is no flaw. So why are you suddenly trying to make things difficult for me afterwards? I tried to protest and struggled desperately. I carefully studied every law of Lee and reviewed a large amount of information on Kyankan Group in recent years, trying to persuade the bank to let it go. I once, or give me justice. But it's useless. No one listens to me. No one even cares about the right or wrong of the truth. I just slide all the way down here like a regular excrement in Chiangsaen district. In the slums, I looked back on the past countless times, trying to figure out what I had done wrong, which step of decision making had gone wrong, and which had brought me to this end. But unfortunately, no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't figure out what I had done wrong. Even if I had to do it over 10 times, I would still make the same choice and end up with the same end. So, tell me, what's the use of weighing the pros and cons? Scene was silent. Hubo's tragedy indeed had nothing to do with any weighing of pros and cons, because a mere individual's weighing was not worth mentioning under the sweep of the general trend. Besides me, there are too many similar examples here. The Yuxin couple used to be university professors, can't you tell? The Wookiee had his own spaceship. Only the red-faced man. No one knows his past. I only heard people say that he worked for the Hutt, but no one had ever seen the Hutt behind him. All in all, most people on this street had experienced the pain of weighing the pros and cons, and they knew very well how to compete with those who were far stronger than themselves. It's just a joke for people to weigh the pros and cons. Over time, they have instinctively resisted the idea of weighing the pros and cons. Hubo added, for example, just now, the dragon hunter asked us to hand over people. If we weigh the pros and cons, considering the perspective, we should betray you to protect ourselves. However, what if they still don't let us go after we betray you? They can just say, I knew you were lying to me that time, and then there is a lot of bloodshed here, and we have no means of restraint. Scene nodded. This possibility is indeed very high. The lesson that the slums have bought with countless blood and tears over the years is not to be superstitious about weighing the pros and cons. The more you calculate, the more you will lose in the end. What is more important than interests is the principle, and the willingness to not hesitate to practice the principle. All awareness and courage. Not cooperating with the higher-ups is the principle of our street. When pukes and people come forward, they are doing whatever it takes to practice this principle. It's a better choice. In fact, he could just sell you out in exchange for everything he had in Chiangsaen district. Unlike me, Puxin and his wife still have a chance to come back. But he didn't do that. He gave up his life without hesitation, when anyone else, well, most of the street leaders, would have done the same thing, and that's why we were chosen as leaders. After all, we cannot ask everyone to ignore the pros and cons, and abide by the principles. Facing the blasters and electric wands of those mercenaries, most ordinary people will still choose to surrender and choose to consider the pros and cons. This is human nature. There is no way. Forced. But we can't succumb to human nature. This is the precious quality left in the slums. Scene was silent for a while and asked, your principle is not to cooperate with the higher-ups, so why not give it to you? What has it brought? Hubo said, haha, we won't consider those issues. What we have brought is just a weighing of the pros and cons of the variant. But if we must say it, I think it is this principle. It brings unity to the slums. For those of us who have fallen to the bottom, the biggest threat does not come from the top. Although they hate us, they will not kill us. On the contrary, as an ecological chain, at the bottom, the slums can help them digest a lot of garbage. The real threat comes from ourselves. Once we, the crowded lower class people, start killing each other for personal interests, the complete destruction of the slums will be around the corner. We all feel that the slums in Tinwang district are purely a burden, but for those of us, they are the only salvation when life is desperate. Therefore, whether it is for the overall survival of the slums, someone must stand up and do it. Do stupid things, and then become a hero that people are willing to follow. Hubo said, suddenly laughing. I remembered a sentence I heard when I was chatting with people before. Everyone hates to be a laser brain, but everyone hopes to be a laser brain. Your friend is a laser brain. For example, if Huang Zuan carefully weighed the pros and cons, the best choice would be to report you. Fortunately, she would not sacrifice her own interests to save you. Laser Brain. Chapter 208. Die again. Scene remained silent. Kenshinran's words had a greater impact on him than Kenshinran himself had expected. The concept that Hu Bo's long story wanted to describe can be summarized in one sentence: stick to principles, not interests. However, this simple concept was subverting Scene's newly formed three views. He felt that the lessons he learned from Xiaozi were rapidly collapsing. Indeed, in the previous series of encounters, the set of values learned from Xiaozi once played a miraculous role. He intimidated Lei Yangtze and raided Xiangsa Nudang, which was more or less due to Xiaozi's ruthless means. However, looking back, what did these means bring him? In other words, Scene, who used the enemy's means unscrupulously, what qualifications did he have to call himself a GD? If everything was considered for the result, then the master would not have had to go to great lengths to collect evidence in Bérgamo. He could have directly found President Jamie Brason and used a mind control technique to get everything, right? If everything is for the sake of results, why should the GD Knights restrain their power? They can play a more important role in the Republic and gain greater power. So, did I do something wrong after all? For a moment, Scene felt complicated and heavy, and the things that had been gradually becoming clear became blurred again. However, before Scene could continue to ponder, there was a noise outside the door. The dragon hunters came back, and this time from their heavy footsteps, Scene clearly heard anger and irritability. The strong Nikto walked to the middle of the street again, first waving his electric rod and breaking a street lamp in front of him. Amid the noise of metal twisting and breaking, and cables short-circuiting and sparking, he roared in a slightly sharper voice. You bunch of rotten maggots, watch out, this is the end of going against the dragon hunters. Then, there was a dull sound of heavy objects falling to the ground, and a piece of charred meat appeared in front of people. That was the corpse of the Puxan man, who had experienced extremely tragic torture before his death. Seeing it, the crowd screamed and cried suddenly. The Nikto enjoyed it all with a cruel and happy smile, and then slammed the electric rod on the ground again. I'll give you another 10 minutes to hand over the wanted criminal. Otherwise, the Nikto deliberately dragged out a long-tailed tone, trying to spread fear, but he soon found to his disappointment that, although the crowd kept screaming, no one was willing to stand up and give up the person he wanted. People seemed to be cooperating with him to stage a farce, and every scream was a perfunctory one. This made the cruel Nikto even more angry. He touched the wound on his throat and pointed the electric rod in his hand at an unrelated civilian, a human woman about 17 or 18 years old, who was trembling because of the dragon hunters' intimidation. For the leader of the dragon hunters, there was nothing else worth caring about except completing the leader's mission. For this, he would not hesitate to slaughter all the slums in Xianhuang District 5. But just as he was about to raise his electric staff, the communicator in his helmet transmitted the voice of his teammates in shock and anger. Carol, we've been fooled. The silver people just rescued people from District 3. District 5 has been their deliberate attempt to confuse people from the beginning. The Nikto man couldn't believe his ears. Are you sure? Group 1 has already exchanged fire with them. The situation is not optimistic. The boss wants us to go to support immediately. I know. The Nikto man took a deep breath, as if he wanted to pour out his anger and depression, and then he turned and left, ignoring the maggots in the slums. After the dragon hunters left, the street finally returned to calm. Screams turned into moans, and cries turned into sobs. Several strong residents joined hands to prop up the collapsed electric poles, and the clever little men began to collect the broken cables. It seemed that people had long been accustomed to the violence that had just happened and only regarded the dragon hunters as a passing storm. After the disaster, they healed their wounds and continued their lives. Scene stood in front of the narrow ventilation vent in the semi-basement, looking at the scenery on the street, and couldn't help sighing. This is the greatest sorrow. Enough. Although he didn't know why the dragon hunters suddenly retreated, this kind of good thing could only happen once or twice, and it would never happen again. As long as Scene stayed here, the dragon hunters would come to the slums again and again to cause trouble. and the residents here had no ability to resist, except to greet the disaster with their flesh and blood indifferently. Scene looked at the charred corpse of the pukes and people left there by the people, and made a decision in his heart. However, when he stepped out of the door, Hubo reached out and pulled him. The Kentine people had little strength, but from that slender palm came a firm will. Don't worry, things are not as bad as you think. You should not have seen the pukes and people, right? Scene was silent for a while and shook his head. The pukes and people are an extremely rare race, almost never appearing in the core area of the Milky Way, and even rarely included in the Atlas. Even with Scene's erudition and curiosity, he could only say the name of the pukes and people at most. Then you will be able to see the special skills of the pukes and people later. Believe me, everyone who witnesses it will want to dig out their eyes. Hubo said with a smile, but it was obviously not a good comfort. Both Scene and Huangzuan looked extremely heavy. After a long time, there was a sound of dragging footsteps outside the room, and then the door was pushed open, and a bloated creature squeezed in. It took Scene a while to recognize that she was a female Pukesan person. As shown in the information, female Pukesan people and male Pukesan people have almost opposite characteristics. Their bodies are neither slender nor light, and they do not have the huge flesh wings behind them to provide the ability to fly. Even her legs that support her body are twisted and deformed. After the female Pukesan person entered the room, her swollen abdomen made a rumbling sound. After a moment, she raised her head, squeezed out a painful groan from her throat, and then suddenly opened her mouth. At this moment, her mouth stretched to an incredible extent, and then, a slender figure fell out from the same. The man had a slender body, a pair of outstretched wings, and a huge collapsed nose. It looked like the Pukesan man who was supposed to die. After spitting out her husband, the female Pukesan man immediately became listless, lying on the ground, gasping weakly. As for the male Pukesan man who came back from the dead, he suddenly opened his eyes, shook his head, shook off the sticky mucus on his head, and made a series of vague nasal sounds. Hubo was well prepared. He took Huangzuan's towel and threw it to the Pukesan man, saying, "Congratulations on your resurrection, Mr. Lan Yi." The Pukesan man who named himself Lan Yi wiped his face carefully with the towel, completely ignoring the disgusting expression of the towel owner Huangzuan, and whispered, "I just hope you didn't let me die in vain this time." Then, he stood up shakily, not caring that he was naked, strode to his wife, carefully helped her up, and then asked her about her well-being in a strange language. Scene asked Hubo, "Is this the stunt you mentioned?" Hubo said, "Yes, it's a stunt that only male Pukesan people can perform. Fake death and resurrection. Married male Pukesan people will form a peculiar symbiotic relationship with their wives. When he is seriously injured and dying, his wife can take him into an organ similar to a brood pouch in her body and give him newborn treatment, sharing her own life with him. The effect is much stronger than any medicine. Of course, the cost of doing so is very huge, almost equivalent to both husband and wife losing half their lives at the same time. No Pukesan person will perform this stunt unless it is absolutely necessary." After a pause, Hubo said, "However, we finally use this trick to deceive the group of dragon hunters." Lan Yi said in a hoarse voice, "What's the use? They have already set their sights on this street. Sooner or later they will come to our door again. Don't expect me to die for you again then." Chapter 209, Lower Your Profile. In response to Lan Yi's question, Hubo said generously, "Don't worry, there is a way." "What is the way?" Hubo turned around and asked Scene, "Is there any way?" Scene was helpless. "It turns out that it is not you who has the way, but I do. Except for you, I can't think of anyone else who can help us get through this difficult time." Hubo said, "You have already seen the power of this street. Apart from some shameful tricks, we have no other skills. If the dragon hunters come again, I can only raise my pistol and launch a death charge against them with the Wikis." After a pause, Hubo said, "But you are different. You are a master who can create an explosion in Chiangsa New Dong and escape safely to Xianhuang District 5. For you, a mere dragon hunter is nothing to be afraid of. So, please help us." After saying that, Hubo knelt on his knees, his forehead pressed against the ground, and the braids behind his head spread out, and fell to the ground respectfully. For the Kentine people, this is the most solemn begging ceremony. Scene helped Ubo up and said, "This happened because of me, so of course I should give everyone an explanation. Don't worry, I will definitely solve the problem of the dragon hunters." Late that night, Scene sent off the Puxan couple and the canteen people, and was filled with emotion. These people living in the slums know the wisdom of survival. They are sandwiched between the dragon hunters and Scene. Offending either party may bring disaster, and there is no way to sit on the fence. In the end, the shrewd canteen people gave a solution, do their best to gain Scene's trust, and then throw the problem to him to solve. This is a very smart and honest way, and as a party being used, Scene is not unhappy at all, but rather grateful for Ubo's heartfelt words. Without Ubo's words, Scene might still be immersed in the shadow of Zazi's utilitarianism, and lose his true direction. However, this kind of ideological awakening alone cannot solve the real problem. After a sigh, Scene couldn't help but fall into deep thought. How to solve the problem of the dragon hunters. This is the trouble he brought to the slums, and he has no choice but to take responsibility. Using violence directly is the worst option, not to mention that his injuries are far from healed. Even if he is in good condition and can easily chop down a group of dragon hunters, what will happen after that? Can he chop all the way until he meets Liu and then walk away? If Zazi were to do this, he would probably use reverse coercion, such as placing bombs in the Xiangsu and Jade building to create a reciprocal deterrence. As long as the upper class dares to touch a hair of the slums, they will have to pay 1,000 times the price. However, Scene is not Zazi, and he doesn't want to learn that utilitarian method anymore. As a Jedi apprentice, he should use more clever and elegant methods to resolve this crisis. At the same time, in Xianhuang District 3, the tall Nikto man took a special airship and rushed all the way from District 5. However, when he arrived at the scene, he saw a battlefield that fell into silence. There were traces of fighting everywhere. The abandoned warehouse area was covered with carbon marks. A high tower made of alloy was melted in half and collapsed on the ground. Corpses and broken weapons and equipment were scattered around the tower. Groups of dragon hunters, 1 or 3, wandered around the battlefield listlessly, cleaning up the mess. The leader of the leading group, a tall and thin middle-aged man, was sitting on the ruins, looking at the Nictus with weak eyes. "Congratulations, Sangun, you came just in time. Flying fish, where are the people from Bayan?" The Nictus were so impatient that they didn't even bother to respond to the ugly nickname Sangun. That was the nickname given to him by his enemies in the past, because he had only 3 breathing tubes left due to his injured throat. Whenever the Nictus heard this name, they would be furious. The leader of Group 1, codenamed Fiu, answered somewhat listlessly, "They just left, and neither of our 2 groups managed to keep them." The leader of Group 3, Faceless, is still there. "After I go back, I will definitely be demoted to the bottom and start over. During this period of time, you will probably be in charge of Group 1 and Group 3. Don't talk nonsense." Nikto grabbed Fiu by the collar. "Where is the wanted criminal? He hasn't been here from the beginning. All of us have been fooled by Liu. He pretended to be here to meet Scene, but in fact he was just diverting our attention." The thin Fiu responded with a gloomy face, and then slapped Sanguin's hand away. "Okay, acting team leader, the next job is up to you." Sanguin rubbed his numb wrist, but surprisingly he did not get angry. Instead, he calmed down and asked, "Fiu, you are a little careless." Fiu said, "Yes, I'm careless. I joined the dragon hunters to avenge King Long, not to be a dog for the rich. Let those who are willing to be dogs do this kind of work of finding people for the rich. No one becomes a dragon hunter for money." Sanguin growled angrily. "Then let me ask you, what does such a high-profile search for a person who blew up the Xiangsu and Jade building have to do with revenge on King Long? What else can we get besides Kyankan coins?" Sanguin panted violently, but was speechless. Because he also didn't understand why the dragon hunters, whose only mission was to destroy King Long, had to do chores for the powerful people of Li here. But the leader had an order, and he could only obey. As a person who was saved by the leader from King Long's gun, Sanguin never questioned any of the leader's orders. Fiu, however, did not have this loyalty. He said sarcastically, "If you ask me, that kid did a great job and the blasting was beautiful. There have been rumors that Li is an important supply port for King Long, and the people in Chiangsa and Udong are inextricably linked to King Long. It would be better if they all died. Go and tell the boss about this. I've said it many times, but the boss has never responded to me. I don't want to question him, nor do I want to agree with him. So it seems not bad to start from the grassroots level casually. At this moment, an old voice was heard from the two people's communicators at the same time. Someone promised me that, as long as we catch Scene, we can get the location of King Long's secret base. Fiahu and Sanguin were startled at the same time. Leader? I know about the Cheyenne Hoang district. Being deceived by the Bayan people is helpless, and I will not pursue it. But during the battle, Fiahu, you obviously did not try your best, resulting in heavy losses for the brothers. From today on, you will start from the beginning. The affairs of Group 1 will be temporarily handled by Group 2. Sanguin responded in a deep voice, yes. Fiahu questioned, Leader, how many of King Long's secret bases have we destroyed? Does it have any impact on them? Whether it is destroying their supplies, or blasting their spaceships, they will quickly recover. Fiahu was interrupted by the leader, before he finished speaking. So we are not going to do anything? That's not what I meant. King Long has been entrenched in the Kayan star system for 100 years. If you trace back to its predecessor, its history is likely to be incredibly long. Such an organization cannot be just a simple pirate organization, and if you want to eliminate King Long, you can't just eliminate ordinary pirates. After a pause, the leader said, this time the news comes from the board of directors. Fiahu was surprised and said, the board of directors? Haven't you always suspected that King Long has the official support of the Kyankan group behind it? Yes, it does. So if you want to eliminate King Long, it is most effective to use the official power. Now, a big shot representing the official has invited us. What reason do I have to refuse? Fiahu asked, why would a big shot who can represent the board of directors seek help from us civilian mercenaries? Because only we can humble ourselves and be dogs for others. Those high-ranking Blackwings, security special forces and the like will not honestly search for criminals in the slums. Okay, you have enough questions, right? Yes, I have no questions. Then get to work. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210, Waiting for the Rabbit. The call ended here. Fiahu turned off the communicator, looked up at Sanguin, and grinned. Give the order, team leader. Sanguin pushed Fiahu away, picked up his favorite electric stick with a fierce momentum, and walked back the way he came. Fiahu was surprised. Wait, where are you going? I just heard that the people from Bayan are in Chiangsa and District 9. Don't worry about the people from Bayan. Can't you see that those people are just troublemakers? Sanguin let out a painful roar. When he talked too much, the old injury on his throat would flare up, making him even more irritable. That scene has been hiding in the black and white street of District 5 from the beginning. Otherwise, how could that group of cowardly people have the courage to risk their lives to deceive us? Twice. Fiahu said, I heard that people on that street always like to band together to disobey the will of their superiors. We work like dogs for the board of directors, so it is reasonable for them to risk their lives to resist us. Don't say such self-deceiving nonsense. They must be shielding the criminal. Sanguin directly swung the electric rod and hit Fiahu, but the latter dodged it sharply. Sanguin certainly didn't waste time chasing him. After shaking off Fiahu, he continued to walk towards Cheyenne Hoang District 5. Not long after, he returned to the street, where he had ravaged twice, but this time, Sanguin was almost dumbfounded. I saw that the crowded, but prosperous street became several times more lively than before. Dozens of flying boats and several small shuttles crowded together above the street. The fully armed civilian mercenaries, each surrounded by well-dressed journalists and program hosts, became the absolute dominant force on the street. In addition, there was a group of writers and scholars following the media, talking to the camera with the reporters and hosts. As for the natives on this street, they all hid in their houses, only cautiously looking out of the window. Damn, what's going on? Fiu followed behind Sanguin and was dumbfounded by the situation. Sanguin couldn't help but groan, and then he found a team of reporters who were filming the street scene, walked forward a few steps, separated the bodyguards who blocked the road with an electric rod, and grabbed the cameraman in the other party's shocked and frightened eyes, and asked, "What are you doing here?" The cameraman struggled a few times in fear, and found that he was in the hands of the Nikto people, like a weightless toy. The mercenaries around him who were supposed to protect him were also afraid of the dragon hunter's deterrence, and retreated without professional ethics. The photographer said helplessly, "We are here to find a wanted criminal." The Nikto people said in disbelief, "Wanted criminal? What wanted criminal?" The photographer said, "I heard that the explosion of the Xiangsu and Jade building was not caused by a gas leak, but a terrorist attack. The terrorist is currently hiding in the black and white streets of the slums. As long as we find him, we can receive a sky-high reward from the Kyankan group." "Who said that?" The photographer trembled. It was the wanted criminal himself. He contacted a tabloid reporter, and then the news spread. People are not very interested in the bounty, but they are still very interested in a terrorist who dared to blow up the Xiangsu and Jade building. In addition, I heard that he is a Jedi apprentice, so. Sanguin took a deep breath, put down the photographer, and quickly walked to another team of reporters, asked the same question, and got the same result. "I say, this is going to be interesting." Fiu walked to Sanguin, with a bit of sarcasm. "No wonder that guy was able to cause trouble under the nose of Blackwing. This trick was unexpectedly clever. It's not convenient for us to use ourselves as bait, to attract such a group of people. Hey, I warn you not to be impulsive. You can't kill anyone here." Sanguin pushed Fiu away angrily. "You don't have to tell me." Looking at the chaos on the street, the Nikto people were also very troubled. These media people, literati, and scholars were not like the poor people in the Xianhuang district, who could be killed at will. On the contrary, this group of people who controlled public opinion were often more valuable than the bureaucracy. With them present, even the most unscrupulous thugs and hooligans would restrain their bad habits and pose harmlessly. Fiu said, "If you ask me, it's a waste of time for us to stand here. Let's go ask the leader what to do. TSK, a bunch of gossipers are making trouble here, and Chen Yao didn't even send anyone to clear the scene. Does he really want to retire?" However, when Sanguin reported the situation on the scene to the leader, the answer he got was unexpected. Chen Yao certainly won't send anyone to clear the scene, because that would be a confession. He has already used up his political resources by suppressing the chaos in Xiangsu and Yudang. Forget it, you don't have to care about these things. As for the situation on the scene, the Jedi apprentice did make a good move, and we still have to admit defeat when it's time to admit defeat. Sanguin said, "Admit defeat, boss, are you kidding? What else do you want to do? Kill in front of all the reporters and make the dragon hunters the target of public criticism in the entire galaxy? Or do you expect those reporters to find the Jedi apprentice who is hiding? Or you help those reporters find scene and then let him face hundreds of cameras to make things even more out of control?" Sanguin was a little unwilling, but he is hiding on this street. This is what is called close yet far away. Don't waste time, retreat. He won this time. Sanguin gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, I will never let the maggots on this street go." "Oh, not let them go? How do you plan to not let them go? When the matter is settled and the heat dissipates, will you come here alone to kill people and make a river of blood? Ha, why did you become a dragon hunter? To vent your anger? Then what is the difference between you and King Lang?" Sanguin was startled and apologized quickly. "That's not what I meant. Don't be so impatient, the matter is not over yet." Although the clever little guy resolved the crisis for a while, he can't stay there forever. He will definitely escape, and his escape route is not difficult to infer. After all, there is almost only one way for him to leave the city. So, we just need to make arrangements on his way to escape. I know. Chapter 211 Newcomer. At the same time, in a basement on Black and White Street, Scene connected to a surveillance probe on the ground through the holographic tablet in his hand, watching the reporters swarming in and blocking the dragon hunters outside the venue. The Jedi apprentice couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. The plan was considered to be effective. With this group of gossip dogs in place, no matter how violent the dragon hunters were, they dared not act recklessly. Although the residents of the street would have some inconvenience in their lives due to the addition of this group of gossip dogs, it could be said that they were safe after all. Of course, this situation could not last long. After all, the enthusiasm of the media workers could not be maintained forever, and once they left, the dragon hunters could still do whatever they wanted. But Scene did not expect to delay for too long with this trick. As long as his injuries were healed, and he had the conditions to break out and escape, he would not have to cause trouble for this street. And when he left, the dragon hunters had no reason to cause trouble for Black and White Street again. While thinking, the crisp applause of the Kent people came to his ears. Hubo clapped his hands and cheered. "It's amazing. You are indeed a master who can blow up the Shiangsu and Jade Pillar. With a little trick, you can make those dragon hunters helpless. Ha, the breathing tube of the Nictor man is about to be blocked. Ouch." Seeing the dragon hunters on the screen who were unwilling and had no choice but to retreat, the Wookiee excitedly raised the crossbow in his hand and let out a sharp roar. "Damn, Yufa, be quiet." The Kenton quickly stretched out his big palm and covered the Wookiee's mouth, turning the Wookiee's excited roar into a whimper. "There are hundreds of spectators above our heads. Please keep your voice down." The Wookiee named Yufa nodded and restrained his voice. The Pukes and people flapping their wings in the air snorted coldly and said, "We sent away the dragon hunters, but we ushered in more troubles. Is this your clever way to get out? How are you going to get out when you are being watched by hundreds of eyes?" His wife asked. "I just saw the news that all the ports have been temporarily closed. What are you going to do?" Scene shook his head, indicating that he didn't have a good solution for the time being. The move of exposing his identity was not out of any long-term planning, but purely for emergency. In the long run, attracting a large group of media people will not help Scene escape from the city. But this is the price he needs to pay. Scene does not regret it, but he is a little worried about what to do next. It is difficult to choose the direction of escape, because now he has almost no way to go. The city has become a huge cage for him. Except for the dragon hunters and those mercenaries, almost everyone in the city is Scene's enemy. The original search warrant for him was only issued in a small area, and his identity was deliberately concealed by the top leaders after all. It is not in the interests of Kyankan Group to openly be enemies with the GD Knights, the Guardians of the Republic. Under this circumstance, the only enemies Scene needs to face are a few elite dragon hunters. However, now, the high bounty and the media focus have attracted the attention of almost the entire city. Scene clearly saw through the tablet in his hand that some idle civilians from Shiangsuan and Shianhuang districts have also joined the search team. Dong dong dong. The dull knock on the door interrupted Scene's thoughts and made the atmosphere in the basement suddenly tense. This basement is a shelter that Hubo introduced to Scene for temporary hiding. The location is extremely hidden, and only a very few people know the entrance, and these insiders have now come to the shelter. So, who is the person knocking on the door? The Wookiee was the first to react. He raised his blaster and pointed the muzzle directly at the door, uttering a deterrent low hum. The Pukes man flew behind Scene alertly and took out a short-barreled blaster. Although his arms were shaking violently and he could hardly aim, a ferocious expression appeared on his face. "Don't be nervous," Scene whispered. He spread his hands and stopped everyone's excess of behavior. "I don't feel any malice." Then, Scene calmly walked to the door of the basement and opened the rusty metal door. Behind the door, a young man wearing a heavy jacket and a beard showed Scene a slightly naughty smile. "Haha, I knew you would definitely open the door." His tone was full of joy. "I have heard of your name for a long time, Senior Ziokianwun. I'm Bajin Jiokian, a new member of the Silver Knights, and I'm really happy to meet you." Scene asked, "Are you sent by Liu?" "Well, the leader said that, if you want to escape, go to the port, Rainbow, in Shiangsuan district in 3 days. If you miss the opportunity, you will fend for yourself here." After saying that, the young man dressed as a photographer winked at Scene and turned away. "I'm sorry I can't talk to you for long. If someone finds out that I, a photographer, am absent from my post, my disguise will be exposed. I look forward to seeing you again in 3 days, Senior." After sending off the young man named Bajin Jiu Kyan, Scene returned to the people in the basement and said, in 3 days, I will find a way to go to Shanzhuan district. Do you have any ideas? Hubo said, don't ask us. If we, the poor people in Shanhuang district, had a way to go to Shanzhuan district, we would have left long ago. The flying Pusan people also snorted coldly. The junction of Shanhuang district and Shanzhuan district is always the most heavily guarded place. The people above have always regarded us as dangerous viruses. Wiki. Oh. Scene regretted that he had not yet mastered the language of the Wiki and could only give him an understanding smile. But in any case, it seemed that these leaders of the black and white streets could not be relied on. Since the man named Beijing Jiu can get into the crowd, can't he take you out with him? Hubo asked. Scene said, if he could do that, he should have thrown the disguise props to me just now. At this time, it was unexpected that Bayan could send someone to me. It turns out that your backer is not very reliable. Puxianran snorted, forget it, let me handle it. Chapter 212 Investors. Everyone's eyes were focused on him. You, Lanyi, are you confused after sleeping? Do you have a way to get to Xiangsuan district? Hubo was the first to question. Ignorant Kentin. Lanyi, a former professor, snorted disdainfully. Where do you think my holographic discs full of bang technologies came from? Do you really have a smuggling channel? Hubo was excited. For those living at the bottom of society, the channel to conduct smuggling trade with Xiangsuan district is priceless. Nonsense. The former professor glanced down at the canteen, fully demonstrating the superiority of an intellectual, and then took out a brand new communicator and muttered a few syllables. A moment later, the door of the basement was pushed open again, revealing a tall and burly red figure. Damn. Huboran was stunned on the spot. Red face, what are you doing here? The red-faced man snorted and looked at Lanyi. Do you want to talk to me about something? Well, do you have a way to send this kid to Xiangsuan district? Rainbow Port. The red-faced man lowered his head and pondered for a while, then nodded. Okay, I'll come to you in 2 days. After saying that, the Clatuan turned around and left, but before leaving, he reminded Huang Zuan of one thing. Human girl, you have caused me a lot of trouble. Starting from next month, your rent will double. Yes. Huang Zuan agreed without hesitation. After the red-faced man left, Hubo said to the Puxan man in an angry and amused tone, so this is your way. Ask for help from the red-faced man? How did you have the nerve to act so arrogant just now? Lanyi sneered at Hubo's questioning. At least I know who to ask for help when I encounter problems, but you don't even know to ask me for help. It was because I had too many students like you that I did stupid things in a fit of anger and ended up in this place. His wife explained to the curious Huang Zuan. When Lanyi was teaching in Xiangsuan district, he sent a student who copied his name when copying homework to Zen to mine in the name of an internship. The Wookiee man muttered, whoa. Lanyi glanced at him and said, a student of Yunming University consumes more than 50,000 Kyankan coins from the city's public budget every year, and it takes them 5 years from enrollment to graduation using the fastest school system. In other words, not only do they waste more than 250,000 tax dollars, but after graduation they will use the title of Yunming University student to rise to higher positions and commit crimes. I think that every one of these people deserves to die. After this explanation, there was a burst of applause in the basement. The former professor's theory was very popular among the people in Xianhuang District 5. Scene asked, what should I pay attention to when cooperating with Redface? Lanyi said, be obedient. This is the only thing to pay attention to. He uses different means to smuggle every time, and he will not let outsiders easily figure out the pattern. I only know that Redface's smuggling has never failed. At least since I started cooperating with him. He can always deliver the goods I want to me, and can also sell my goods at a good price in Xiangsuan district. If there is anyone in this street, no, in the entire Xianhuang District 5 who can help Scene go to Rainbow Port, it must be the Clatuan people. This vague explanation did not reassure Scene, but now Scene had no choice but to trust the other party. Well, after answering your question, it's your turn to answer mine. Looking at the old Puxan man, Scene had guessed what he wanted to ask. about his identity and his purpose. That's probably it. He didn't even talk about these topics with Liu, of course. It was because the other party never asked. But today, there is no point in hiding these. Even the tabloid reporters on the street knew that a GD apprentice had blown up the Xiangsa New Dang and then hid in the black and white street in the Xianhuang District 5. So since the other party wants to know, Xin will tell the truth. Of course, but you can ask. Lan Yi said, are you really a GD knight? GD apprentice. Xin corrected, I'm still a long way from being a qualified GD knight. I can see that. Lan Yi touched his smooth chin. But, what is a GD apprentice doing in Li? Although this city is rotten, the entire galaxy is rotten everywhere. GD knights can't handle it, even if they die of exhaustion. In fact, you have never interfered in specific government affairs. Xin said, yes, I'm here to investigate the death of Nanheli. Lan Yi was stunned when he heard this, and then relieved. Nanheli's death. No wonder, he has always been the most hardcore pro-Republican faction in the group. He is dead, and you do have reason to send people to investigate the truth. But it seems that your investigation is not going very smoothly. Xin said, it's really hard to put it into words. The water in Kyankan group is deeper than we thought. In fact, I still find it difficult to understand why they would target us at such a cost. Hubo said, what's so hard to understand about this? The Kyankan group has committed so many evil things, and the galaxy has been ruined like this by them. Of course they will be afraid of the arrival of the messenger of justice. Lan Yi sneered, ruined to what extent? Are you like that? Yes, there are places like black and white streets everywhere in the Kyan galaxy, where tragedies are rampant. But in general it is still a highly developed and prosperous galaxy. Even if you search the entire Optivus star region, you can't find many galaxies more prosperous than the Kyan galaxy. The Kyankan group can manage such a prosperous and wealthy galaxy, and the Republic is highly recognized by it, so why would it care about some trivial internal affairs? Besides, the death of a pro-Republic politician is actually a big deal or a small matter. The most serious thing is that the representative of the Kyankan group will be sprayed with dust in the Senate and then bring back a few sanctions documents for everyone to laugh at. The Republic has also sanctioned the Kyankan group in the past, but it had no effect at all. If not for this, the group would not be so close to the Republic. Then, in this case, why did Kyankan group make such a fuss? Wouldn't it be better to just let the GD investigate? After Lan Yi finished a series of questions, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Hubo couldn't help but ask, maybe it's because the person who killed Nanheli is an extremely important person? For example, the head of the Zaya family, so they would hide the truth at all costs. Lan Yi heard this, and the word contempt was printed directly on his face. Are you trying to say that the chairman of the Kyankan group personally went to Nanheli's manor to stab someone? Don't say such a joke. It's just a murder case. It's too easy for the chairman to find someone to take the blame. What's more, even if the GD Knights finally got solid evidence to prove that the chairman was the murderer, what can they do? Do you expect that there will be any law that can judge him? Then what do you think happened? Lan Yi said, if I knew what happened, I would have died long ago, and it would be useless for me to have a few more wives to save me. After a pause, the former Professor Puzan said, however, from the story Xin told, I can make a few guesses. Xin said seriously, please give me some advice. The biggest possibility is that the Kyankan group has an extremely secret that cannot be revealed, the kind of secret that will be unacceptable to the entire galaxy once the truth is revealed. For example, horrific massacres, aggressive wars against other sovereign planets, and corporate groups. The death of Nanheli is directly related to this secret. Once the GD Knights follow Nanheli's clues, the secret may be exposed. So the Kyankan group would rather make a big deal and frame him with the reputation of the GD Knights. Xin nodded gently. I have also considered this possibility, but to be honest, Xin couldn't think of what secrets the Kyankan group could hide. Objectively speaking, the Kyan galaxy under the rule of the Kyankan group can be regarded as a model galaxy in the Optivus star zone. Although there are many bad crimes inside, they only stay at the individual level. This cannot be used to deny the effectiveness of the Kyankan group's governance. Chapter 213 Come back when you have time. I can't think of anything, at least as far as I know. The Kyankan group has not done anything worthy of an overreaction. But, speaking of overreaction, Lanyi tried his best to think, subconsciously rubbing his chin hard, so that the sound begins to deform. If you must tell me, I have a clue, but I'm just saying it tentatively, and you can listen to it. Do you know Nirvana? Of course. Scene said solemnly. That's good. I used to be a long-term special consultant of that hospital. I spent at least 1/3 of the year doing research in the hospital. The specifications of that hospital are also among the best in the entire galaxy. The treatments are the best. The best doctors, the most advanced equipment and the strictest security measures. But, maybe once a year, or almost always, then sometimes, the alert level of this hospital will reach an incredible level. Hubo interjected, are you talking about when the security forces conduct joint exercises? On the contrary, soldiers from the security bureau are everywhere. When the hospital is relatively relaxed, the director and several directors usually choose to take a vacation at that time. Oh. People from Kent, who know nothing about the upper class, can only play with themselves in boredom braids. Lanyi continued to explain, the increase in the hospital's alert level will not be noticed by outsiders. Even inside the hospital, most employees know nothing about it. But on special days, such as the annual 100 boats every day, I can see some very mysterious people in the hospital. They wear casual clothes and don't have any uniform signs on their bodies. Most of them look ugly. But when I get close to them, I feel chilling. Hubo said thoughtfully. Is it Puxon's intuition? It can be said that the key is that my premonition of crisis is not once or twice, but every time. So I'm sure that there is something wrong with those people. And once, I saw Chen Yaoxiang with my own eyes. They laughed. Hubo whistled. You can actually see Chen Yao? Lanyi, who was born as a professor, did not bother to answer such low-level questions and continued talking. These people appear in the hospital every time. It won't last more than 3 days, and the people who come each time are basically different. I have contacted them 4 or 5 times, and only one person appears repeatedly. Before the story of the Puxon people was finished, Scene said, a tablet was handed over, with a resolute man's face drawn on it. It's him. Lanyi's eyes widened. It's him. Do you know him? Scene said, that's right. He is the captain of Black Wing, and Black Wing is the exclusive private soldier of the board of directors. Board of directors? No wonder Chen Yao is so cowardly. He has always wanted to be on the board of directors. Lanyi showed an unsurprising expression. Hubo asked, wait, it's nothing new for big shots on the board of directors to come to Nirvana to see a doctor. As for bringing it up specifically, it's indeed nothing new for board members to come to see a doctor. What's new is that over the past few years, there have been occasional incidents of unknown importance. If someone collides with Black Wing, they will disappear without a trace afterwards. I know that in the dry galaxy, the nobles of the upper class and the lower class are almost not the same kind of creatures, but this kind of thing, that makes people disappear from the world at the slightest violation, I know. It is unheard of. In addition, no one knows who the person who comes to see a doctor is so closely protected by Black Wing. Finally, when people from Black Wing appear, there is often a figure of Blue Dragon in the city. King Lung? Scene frowned. Do you think there is a connection between the two? How would I know? Lanyi explained impatiently. I just don't think it looks like it. It's a coincidence. Although Li is an all-inclusive city that is open to everyone, it never includes pirates who are always on the wanted list. Scene recalled the previous meeting with the leader at the military base. Said, King Long is not a simple pirate organization. There has always been official support behind it. No wonder it has been dead for so many years. It turns out that it is simply an official lackey. The collusion between officials and bandits has fermented out the kind of dragon hunters. Extreme civil organizations are also a natural thing. Lanyi sneered a few times, and then said, once, a few people with obvious gangster temperament came to the hospital. Such people are extremely rare in Nirvana, and I was at that time. I was bored, so I paid attention. They brought a guest who was wrapped in a cloak and obviously didn't want to reveal his identity. The guest was surrounded by several gangsters, and the person responsible for picking them up was actually there. It was the dean and his cronies, and there was also a person from Black Wing. During the handover, the man's cloak fell down. He looked almost the same as a human, but he had a pair of slender hair on his head. Horn. When he heard the word horn, Sin's eyes widened, and he thought of Xios Leong and the rows of cultivation cabins. Lanai said, although I was far away at the time, I was very sure that the person did not belong to any race I knew. More importantly, not long after that, the hospital unilaterally terminated the consultant agreement with me. Hubo said, it seems that the horned man is not trivial. You saw something you shouldn't see. So I simply sent some of the most annoying students to the animal laboratory to accompany him. The chicken danced and then escaped here. The above are the clues I can think of. The hospital has been reacting excessively from beginning to end. After Lanyi finished speaking, he looked at Sin. So, GD apprentice, what do you think? Any clues? Sin nodded slowly and shook his head. I have an idea, but there is no evidence. Tell me about it. Hubo shook his braid curiously and asked Sin to tell more. A weighty message. Lanyi sneered. Haven't you heard the old saying, curiosity kills the people of Kent? Do you really think that you, a street vendor in the slums, deserve to know the secrets of the group level? If you don't want to be silenced, just that's it. Hubo said angrily, you are a person who has fallen into a slum because you know too much. How can you blame me? However, when it comes to Nirvana, I remember that I was in Shiangsuan district before. When they were running the shop, they treated investors to dinner. When they got drunk, they kept talking about various ways to make money, from smuggling drugs to delivering illegitimate babies for rich people, and one of them highlighted cutting-edge organisms. Pharmaceutical research will be a hotspot for a long time. Lanai nodded. That's right, he has some insight. Hubo sighed. It's a pity that that person was fired not long after, and everyone related to him was also fired. What a bad luck. Fortunately, I thought he was the most reliable among those people. Sin couldn't help but interrupt. Okay, I understand. Thank you for your help, but I'm really tired and want to rest. Lanai nodded. Well, have a good rest and I wish you good luck in 2 days. Hubo said, if you come back again in the future, remember to blow up the Shiangsuan Jade building. Chapter 214 Media People. After sending away the leaders of Black and White Street, Sin fell into deep thought again in the basement. The clues provided by Ul and Yi are very important, and can almost completely connect the information he previously had. Why did the Kyankan group choose so radically to become the enemy of the GD Master? Why did a senior member of Nan Auditorium's board of directors die mysteriously in his own manner? What happened to Zhuang Yuanying's bizarre home? Putting these questions together, the answers seem to be ready to come out. The Kyankan group secretly conducts human experiments that are against human ethics, and Zhuang Yuanying and her people are the victims. And this kind of appalling criminal behavior is enough to trigger a tsunami of anger within the dry galaxy alone. No one can afford such consequences, so on this issue, Kyankan group must have drawn a deadline, and offenders will be killed without mercy. Nanheli's death was most likely directly related to this matter. In fact, in the past few years, Nanheli was probably not the only one who died because of this matter. For example, the patient from the Ma family who implicated Wang Yi and ruined his family. Another example is that Zhu Bo and Li Yu both mentioned that every once in a while, a senior executive of Kyankan group would die suddenly. The special thing about Nanheli is that he is the politician who has the closest relationship with the Republic, so after his death, he attracted the attention of the Republic and attracted the GD Knights. Otherwise, he would most likely die silently together with the unlucky Nan Kyan. The arrival of the GD Knights was a great stimulus to the Kyankan group. Conflicts that could be digested internally in the past were at risk of being exposed, so their reaction was particularly intense. A series of inferences almost clearly laid out the results in front of him, but Sin thought about it again and again, and overturned and dismantled all the inferences into independent clues. The matter was so important that he could not blindly deduce and judge based on the clues he had. The conclusion just came from his intuition, without evidence or a rigorous chain of reasoning. In fact, upon careful consideration, it is not difficult to find that there are still many gaps that are difficult to fill. For example, SYN did not have any evidence to prove that the Kyankan group was persecuting Zhuang Yuanying. The environment of her home and the base was indeed strange and terrifying, but it was ultimately a medical research environment, not a bloody slaughterhouse. What the Puxan people saw was that people from Qinglong sent a patient who looked like Zhuang Yuanying to Nirvana. There was no evidence to prove that the patient had suffered inhuman treatment in Nirvana. In addition, according to Nan Qianayu, Nanheli was conducting force research before his death, not biochemical research. This was also the reason why Nan Qianayu pointed the finger at the GD master and apprentice before his death, and it was also the reason why Xian unscrupulously framed the blame. The GD support. This is also inconsistent with SYN's conclusion. And even if all the details match up, it still won't help, because SYN simply doesn't have enough solid evidence. Not to mention trying to convince the Senate of the Republic. Even if he saw Master, SYN couldn't say to her, "Master, I was chatting and laughing with a few big guys in the slums, and I learned the truth about the Kyan galaxy." So things can only go as far as at this point. SYN will not draw conclusions easily, and will not even ask Lan Yi for more information. He has already said enough, and if he continues, he may endanger his own safety. But no matter what, the conversation with Lan Yi and others still gave SYN important revelations. If he continues to follow the current direction, he believes that the truth will come to light sooner or later. Of course, before finding out the truth, you must first preserve your usefulness. 2 days later, the Klatine opened the basement door on time. In the middle of the room, he saw the GD Padawan getting ready to go. SYN put on the light armor prepared for him by the Wikis, put on the cloak Hubo gave him, and around his waist was the iconic GD weapon. Other than that, he didn't carry any baggage. He knelt on the ground with his eyes closed, and his whole body seemed to be integrated with some elusive power. There was a trace of awe on the dark red face of the Klatuan man, and he did not dare to disturb the other party. But the GD apprentice opened his eyes at this moment, and showed a gentle smile. "Let's go." The Klatuan man hummed passively, inexplicably feeling that the initiative in this escape no longer belonged to him. But he quickly shook his head and shook off the illusion. There is no one in the entire Xianhuang district, or even in the entire Li, who is better at smuggling than him. At this tense moment, there are only a handful of people who can help the GD apprentices escape from the city, and he can only take the lead. It couldn't be anyone else. In fact, the few shabby leaders on Black and White Street in Xianhuang district alone were not qualified to ask him to take action. The red-faced man was never a red-faced person on Black and White Street. He just happened to collect rent from a few houses on Black and White Street. Recently, he happened to get a signal from the owner to pay more attention to the people on Black and White Street. The person who really asked him to assist Zhao in smuggling was a big shot who didn't even want to antagonize his master, so the red-faced man did his best to deal with this smuggling. He used all the resources that he had been operating in Xianhuang district for many years, mobilized to ensure the process is foolproof. This sure thing naturally includes his escorts. From now on, do as I say, and don't act rashly. The red-faced man's voice was hoarse and low, with an undeniable sense of oppression, and SYN responded with enough cooperation. Of course. The red-faced man looked at him carefully. SYN, after confirming that he was indeed not the kind of customer who would cause trouble on his own initiative, nodded. "Follow me." He opened the door and led SYN all the way up, directly to Black and White Street. The streets at this time were dilapidated and desolate, and the traces of the dragon hunter's rampage had not been eliminated at all, but had become worse. Facts have proved that in terms of destroying the scene, the professional media people are far more brilliant than the dragon hunters. After their enthusiastic tracking and reporting over the past 2 days, Black and White Street has almost shed a layer of skin. Anyone who can hide people cannot. Every corner of Tibet was searched. However, 2 days of intense searches yielded nothing. Except for the Platinum 9000 who was a temporary guest photographer on the first day, no media worker could touch the basement where SYN was hiding. At the same time, various social problems exposed in Xianhuang district gradually aroused dissatisfaction among the upper class. As a result, media enthusiasm began to subside significantly when the Clatine came to the surface. Except for a few individual workers who were still unwilling to give up, most of the media had given up on continuing to search for Jedi apprentices. Instead, dragon hunters and idle mercenaries returned to the streets. If the media people can't find the Jedi apprentice, they can go back to the office and use their imagination to compile eye-catching news. However, the mercenaries can't find the person, but can't find the employer to receive the reward. Before the Jedi apprentice is really caught, they can only continue to search. However, even the dragon hunters, who are known for their concentration, can no longer maintain their previous high-pressure posture, because they are also entangled with people, media people. Chapter 215 The Media's Duty. The media who gathered in Black and White Street failed to find the Jedi apprentice, but unexpectedly found the dragon hunters who were close at hand. The media showed great interest in this group of civilian armed forces who regarded themselves as avengers and always acted alone. How did they have a grudge with King Lang? How many people are there? Who is the leader currently relying on? Where does the organization's operating resources come from? Why did they run to Lee this time? The rampage of the Dragon Hunters Action Group 2, the leader of the third tube, in Black and White Street has attracted widespread attention from the media. Especially on the day when the media flooded in, countless people with bruises appeared in Black and White Street, surrounding the media and crying about the Dragon Hunters' atrocities. For such news delivered to the door, practitioners naturally accept it. For a time, the Dragon Hunters, who were at the forefront of the storm, of course, could not stay where they were and let others expose them. But they did not completely withdraw. In the past 2 days, the Dragon Hunters have established a temporary ecosystem in the Xianhuang district. With a few elite Dragon Hunters as the core, they remotely controlled a large number of unorganized and undisciplined grassroots mercenaries scattered in various places in the Xianhuang district to collect information and perform miscellaneous tasks. These low-level mercenaries are unorganized and undisciplined, but they are omnipresent. The slums are almost their natural home ground. Although they cannot reach the basement of Black and White Street, they can block the way out of this street. When the Clatuinian took scene to the street, they were immediately stared at by 7 or 8 pairs of eyes at the same time. A skinny young man with red hair, wearing tattered leather armor, staggered over and cast a provocative look at the red-faced man. Red-faced, who is that next to you? The Clatuinian ignored him and strode forward, as if the little mercenary leader named Liu Sandeo in front of him was just an obstructive carbon mark. Liu Sandeo was not angry, but smiled and dodged to the side. Facing this famous red-faced man, ordinary low-level mercenaries have no right to be angry, so no one would laugh at his concession. But after avoiding the Clatuinian, Liu Sandeo very cleverly reached out and lifted Sin's cloak. Because he had not received any instructions from the red-faced man, the Jedi apprentice did not resist and let the hood on his head fall down. His face, still young and immature, and his braids were exposed to the sight of the surrounding mercenaries. "Oh, who is this woman?" Liu Sandeo asked in a long tone, in a joking tone. "A new tenant?" The Clatuin man's sturdy body came in front of Liu Sandeo like lightning and punched him and sent him flying. "Don't touch my tenant." Liu Sandeo struggled to get up in the ruins. None of his men dared to come close to help him. He said shakily, "It's all routine. If I don't expose it, there will always be others who will. But thank you for showing mercy and not killing me. I will find a chance to return the favor later." Liu Sandeo blew away the blood from his nose and then said to his men, "You all saw it. Report it to the big shots above." Immediately, a mercenary leaning on the corner of the street said to the communicator, "The red-faced man left with a human woman. She is his new tenant. Ah, she looks about 20 years old, about the same as Huang Zuan before." "Brother Sandeo?" He was punched by the red-faced man. Not far away, another mercenary said in disbelief, "Wait, a woman in her 20s? Did I see it wrong just now? Why do I think it's a man? You are really blind. You can't tell men from women." The single questioning voice was immediately drowned out by the laughter. While the mercenary was talking, the red-faced man had already taken Sin away from the street and continued to walk outside. Sin injured the doubts in his heart and said nothing. Liu Sandeo and the others seemed to be full of hostility, but they were just lying to cover up for him and the red-faced man. Not long after that, the red-faced man encountered the next level. A tall reporter with blonde hair and blue eyes approached him and said, "I'm Gangso Man, a reporter from Xianhuang News. Are you the famous red-faced man? Some people say that you are the landlord of Xianhuang district on the surface, but you are running a smuggling business in secret. Is that true?" The red-faced man ignored Gangso Man and just walked forward with his chest puffed out, pushing the equally tall reporter away. The reporter followed closely and chattered. "It is said that the people of Clatuin are all running dogs of the huts, so your boss behind you is a hut, right? The people here are also afraid of your boss, so they keep all kinds of privileges for you in Xianhuang district." The noise of the reporter soon attracted the attention of the surroundings. Some idle poor people and mercenaries who heard the news came over one after another. However, the streets of Xianhuang District 5 have always been narrow. When Gangsoman and the red-faced man walked side by side, they basically occupied all the space on the road. Although people came from all directions, they did not dare to get too close. They could only squeeze together and keep a distance to watch. Gangsoman asked, "I just noticed that you beat up Liu Sandeo, the captain of a civilian security team, for no reason, and he did not dare to resist. May I ask if this is the privilege given to you by the huts? Do you think that in the slums of Li, fear plays a greater role than law and order? By the way, I heard that there are dangerous wanted criminals hiding nearby. Are you involved in sheltering them? In addition, are you using your smuggling channels to arrange an escape plan for him? Is this woman behind you your test subject? You want to use her to verify whether your smuggling channels can penetrate the layers of blockades in the city." The red-faced man naturally ignored this series of questions until Gangsoman asked the last question and reached out to lift the Jedi apprentice's cloak. The red-faced man pushed him away. Gangsoman stumbled into the crowd, knocking all the onlookers to the ground, but he still shouted loudly, "Is that woman a slave of the huts? You have actually been helping the huts in the slave trade, right?" At this time, the red-faced man had already turned a street with his clients and disappeared into an abandoned factory. Several people who were pinned down by Gangsoman struggled to push him away and at the same time asked curiously, "Are you going to die? Dare to get so close to the red-faced man?" Gangsoman patted the dust off his body and said, "Those who are qualified to kill live in Xiangsuan district, so if you want to kill, you have to find a way to get to Xiangsuan district. Unfortunately, I thought I could catch the opportunity just now." At this time, the red-faced man suddenly went out with a man in a cloak. It is very likely that he was escorting someone who was not allowed to see the light. Unfortunately, Gangsoman shook his head. "It's just a strange woman. Maybe she is really just a slave of the huts." "Ah, did you see it clearly? That's a woman?" someone asked. Gangsoman said, "Of course I can see." "No, I can't see anything. Maybe it's a wanted criminal. I'll go back and write a report to earn the rent." As Gangsoman left with an excited look on his face, the crowd was disappointed. Since the friction between Gangsoman and the red-faced man happened in a narrow corridor, most people couldn't get close to see the true face of the person in the cloak and could only blindly guess his identity. At this time, hearing what Gangsoman said, it was obvious that the cloaked man was not the wanted criminal with a super high bounty. There was no need to pay attention to her anymore. A strange woman, whether she was a tenant or a slave, had nothing to do with them. Chapter 216. Continuous magical powers. On the other side, the Jedi apprentice walking in the abandoned factory was already surprised by the power of the Clatuin people. After 2 interceptions by Liu Sandeo and Gangsoman, he had seen through the red-faced man's smuggling method. To put it bluntly, it was very simple. It was a stooge. Whether it was Liu Sandeo, Gangsoman, or even some seemingly irrelevant passers-by along the way, they were all arranged in advance by the red-faced man. They pretended to conflict with the red-faced man, but in fact they were cooperating with the red-faced man to create an illusion. The red-faced man was escorting just an ordinary human woman. This method is simple but effective. As long as enough stooges are arranged, an extremely realistic illusion can be created to deceive the world. And there is no doubt that the red-faced man's stooges are not just enough. He even arranged his own people in this abandoned factory. A dag hiding on the ceiling said to the communicator in a hoarse and ferocious voice, "I saw him, with a woman." The drunkard collapsed in a pile of mud and said in a drunken tone, "Ah, that Clatuin man is coming with a woman. So you can go to the black and white street, the hometown, as long as you are not afraid of death." In this factory building where there is no one at ordinary times, the voices of shills can be heard everywhere. Each of them has an identity that has nothing to do with the red-faced man, either a famous warrior in the Cheyenne District 3 or an unknown drunkard. But at this time, they all became tools in the hands of the red-faced man, playing a common role, covering scenes escape. Their feedback, collected through layers of channels, confused the judgment of those remote controllers and made them misallocate the resources in their hands to other places. The Cheyenne district is not big, but not small. Once the resources are misallocated, it will be difficult to lock onto locals like the red-faced man. In fact, when the red-faced man passed the abandoned factory and came to a food street at the other end, there were fewer eyes staring at him. But the Clatuin man did not relax his vigilance. He took Scene to a street stall and sat down, saying, "2 servings of sea monkey stew noodles." The chef looked at him, took out 2 watery creatures from a bucket, and threw them into 2 bowls of boiling noodles. The 2 brightly colored creatures made comfortable groans, rolled around in the bowls of noodles, and were fished out by the chef and thrown back into the bucket. The color on their bodies became a little lighter. The Clatuin man took away the dyed bowl of noodles and pushed the other bowl to Scene, indicating that he should eat quickly. Scene didn't know what mechanism was hidden in this thing called sea monkey stewed noodles, but he understood the Clatuin man's intentions, so he lowered his head silently and picked up the noodles with chopsticks and put them into his mouth. A delicious smell that made people's scalps numb loomed on the taste buds. At the same time, the boss of the noodle stall explained, "Eat it quickly. You won't be able to eat this cheap delicacy in a few years." Since the last monkey shit from Cheyenne district who came here to experience life didn't know how to rinse his mouth after eating noodles, he poisoned himself. This little thing has been banned from import. Scene suddenly felt that the noodle soup was a little hard to swallow. Obviously, this strange stewed noodle has the advantages of good quality and low price, but it also has the disadvantage of being highly toxic. If the noodle soup stays in the mouth for a long time and comes into contact with the air, it will quickly produce deadly poisons. Although a simple rinse can solve the problem, the only people who can enjoy this delicacy safely are probably the carefree locals and the Jedi apprentices who were asked by the Clatuin people to finish all the food with gestures. When Scene finally drank the last mouthful of noodle soup and took the kettle handed over by the Clatuin man, the noodle stall owner suddenly smiled and said, "You have a good appetite, ma'am. You didn't leave any food. Then according to the rules, you can get your meal for free." The red-faced man nodded and put the meal fee on the table. Scene couldn't help but sigh that the red-faced man's smuggling operation was indeed very meticulous, and he had done enough homework on almost every detail. Although it seemed that the gender of the customer was deliberately emphasized, there were no loopholes in the whole process, making it impossible for people to doubt it. This response was also very effective. When he paid the bill and left, not to mention the dragon hunters, even those civilian mercenaries who were still unwilling to give up seemed to have lost interest in the red-faced man. But there will always be accidents. After leaving the food court, the 2 men were stopped by 2 men in bureaucratic uniforms. The 2 men descended from the sky in a small aircraft, and their target was obviously the red-faced man. This was undoubtedly an unexpected encounter. When the red-face saw the 2 men, he immediately waved his hand behind him to signal Scene to be alert. Of the 2 bureaucrats, one was nearly middle-aged, with a big belly. The standard belt could hardly restrain his abdominal fat, and the nameplate on his chest was engraved with his name and position, Looming, Deputy Chief of the 7th Affairs Section. The nameplate of the other young man was engraved with, Liu, Section Member of the 7th Affairs Section. Looming was the first to attack. "Wait a minute, you are Redface?" The Clatuin rarely responded to the person who blocked his way. He looked down at Looming and nodded. "It's me." Looming showed a disgusted expression. "What a ridiculous name. When you came to the Khan Galaxy, didn't anyone train you about the naming rules here?" Redface said expressionlessly. I heard that in the Kyan galaxy, only people with decent backgrounds have their own surnames, and the lower class only have code names and names, so my name is Redface. Looming couldn't help but widen his eyes in rage when he heard this. The rules mentioned by the red-faced man do exist in the Kyan star system, but they are not widely used. Currently, only people in very few areas retain this custom. But Looming is one of the victims of this custom. Although he is already a proud company employee, the problem of not having a surname will accompany him for a long time. Fortunately, Looming's companions did not want to escalate the verbal conflict and interrupted him in time. We are ordered to investigate your tax situation. You already own multiple properties in Cheyenne district. The red-faced man said, I have submitted the tax form on time. Looming took out the holographic tablet on his chest, checked the messy data on it, and said, really? But I heard that you took in new tenants in Black and White Street. According to the regulations. The red-faced man took out a card with a large amount of Kyankan coins without changing his expression, and handed it to Looming. I know, this is an additional tax. Looming's originally angry face suddenly calmed down. This red-faced man, who is famous in Cheyenne district, seems to know the rules. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 The Last Level. The newly promoted deputy section chief of the affairs section immediately lost interest in making things difficult for the other party. He waved his hand and said, okay, I'll let you go this time. Remember to pay taxes on time in the future. By the way, who is behind you? You are hiding your head, but showing your tail. For Looming, the last sentence was just a casual question. He was not interested in whether the red-faced man was helping people smuggle or sheltering a wanted criminal. But for the red-faced man, this problem was very tricky because according to the rules of the Cheyenne district, when these bureaucrats representing the company made similar requests, the only correct response was to show the suspected target in an honest manner to prove his innocence. In simple terms, it was to take off the hood, reveal the face, and then use the holographic tablet in Looming's hand to make a simple authentication in the database. Of course, Looming might not have the patience to do that authentication. He might just take a look at the face under the hood and ignore the red-faced man. But now the face under the hood cannot be shown to anyone. This place is no longer the stage perfectly arranged by the red-faced man. There are not so many shills around, and it is impossible to create an atmosphere of parroting. So once Scene's appearance is exposed, the setting of a female tenant in her 20s will immediately collapse. But if the red-faced man is indifferent at this time, it will obviously reincite Looming's anger and make him cause trouble again. Scene's heart moved, and he was ready to step forward to use the mind-touching technique to overcome the difficulties. But before he could act, he saw the hands of the Klaatuan man behind his back clenched into fists, indicating that he must not act rashly. The next moment, a violent explosion suddenly came from the distance. Scene turned his head in surprise and looked in the direction of the explosion. It was clearly the location of the Black and White Street. However, the red-faced man did not give Scene more time to react. He seized the opportunity and took advantage of Looming and Shielu to collapse on the spot in fear. He quickly stepped forward and past the two people and whispered a sentence. This female human is my tenant. I'm going to take her to shelter. Good. Looming nodded subconsciously, completely unaware of what he heard. The red-faced man took Scene for a long distance before he finally slowed down. The explosion at Black and White Street gradually dissipated. After all, it was just an explosion in the chaotic slums, not enough to attract too many people's attention. Before Scene spoke, the red-faced man said that was the cooperation that Hubo and the others had prepared long ago. Once an accident that was difficult to handle properly occurred, they would use the explosion to attract attention and buy us a chance. Obviously, they knew how much trouble these two officers who were on our way would cause. Scene nodded without asking more questions. He was indeed concerned about whether there would be casualties on Black and White Street, but since everything was as planned, all he had to do was cherish this opportunity and go to Rainbowport with the help of the red-faced man to meet Liu. However, after following the red-faced man for so long, Scene's doubts became deeper and deeper. Where was the red-faced man going? The front was not the direction of Xiangsuan District at all. On the contrary, it was the bottom of Xianhuang District 5, a garbage dump that was not mentioned too much in any information, and it was also the farthest point from Rainbowport in the entire Xianhuang District 5. In terms of the process, the red-faced man's smuggling operation was flawless and concealed everyone's eyes, but in terms of the result, he led Scene to a dead end. But Scene never expressed his doubts, just silently followed the red-faced man. The two walked all the way to a gloomy, cold and silent square. It was called a square, but it was actually crowded and cramped, especially the end was separated by a huge rusty metal wall, as if it was a beheading place. The cold wind and rotten smell came to the face, but covered in this stench, there were also a lot of living people. This is the slum at the bottom of District 5. The red-faced man suddenly explained to Scene. In most official data, this is a no man's land, but there are actually many people alive here. Although in the eyes of the people in the slums, they are no different from the dead. There were many metal sheds standing crookedly on the square. Unlike the Black and White streets that were simple, but at least had complete structures, the metal sheds here were like homeless people using rags to cover their bodies carelessly. Living in the metal sheds were a group of creatures that barely looked like humans. Even the poorest and most destitute people in the slums were not as dirty and desperate as them. These people once lived in the sky. The red-faced man stretched out his hand, and Scene's eyes followed it, and he saw a magnificent light in a trance. The next moment, a flash of inspiration came to his mind, and he suddenly realized that the light came from Buzzhao. The energy core from Li passed through the Xiangsuan district and cast a little afterglow on the garbage dump at the bottom. It was as if the nobles in high places were throwing food crumbs in their hands to the beggars. The red-faced man had no mercy at all and pointed at the residents in the square and said, but now they can only crawl in the mud because they don't want to live on the ground, don't want to accept everything around them, and would rather use their remaining lives to pray for their own ascension to heaven. Scene nodded and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The heavenly people mentioned by the red-faced man were obviously the natives of the Xiangsuan district, such as Dr. Wang Yi. For various reasons, they lost their identities and privileges and fell to the bottom of the city. But unlike Wang Yi, who was enjoying himself in Xiangsuan District 9, some people completely refused to accept reality and were unwilling to start a new life in the slums. Instead, they begged Xiangsuan District to reopen its doors to them day and night. This dead silent square was probably their place of prayer. The red-faced man said, the reason why they gathered here is because it is said that there is a passage that leads directly to Xiangsuan District. Scene blinked and disagreed with the legend. Indeed, from a geographical point of view, this square is not far from Xiangsuan District. Although the light from the top of the head seems to be from another world, according to the three-dimensional map of Li, the wall behind is indeed the territory of Xiangsuan District, but it is a storage area of District 7, not the living area. This space city is not a flat structure, and Xiangsuan District is not only the living area on the ground. However, just looking at the ruthless thick wall, one can clearly feel the insurmountable gap between Xianhuang District and Xiangsuan District. High voltage electricity, surveillance cameras, automatic turrets, said the red-faced man. The people behind the wall know very well what kind of people are gathered here, so they will do everything possible to block them outside the wall. Scene added in his heart, but more important are those invisible obstacles. After being stripped of their identities, even if people return to the Xiangsuan district, they are just unwelcome foreign objects. Compared with a person's character and ability, identity is often more important. So even if there is a secret passage that allows people to go directly to the Xiangsuan district, what does it matter? Is there a rule in Li that stipulates that people who walk through that road can be pardoned for all crimes and restore their identities? In the final analysis, it is just a group of people who are unwilling to admit reality and put their hopes on invisible things like religion. At the same time, the red-faced man said, but as long as you can cross this wall, you can easily reach Rainbow Port. There is a fast track for cargo transportation from the underground storage area to Rainbow Port. There will be a track express train every standard time, and it is currently under the control of Bayan. And helping you cross this wall is my job. Sin's heart was lifted. Could it be that the red-faced man really has a way to climb over this wall and help him get directly to Shiangsuan district? This smuggling route is really unexpected. But at this moment, Sin couldn't help but frown. I have a bad premonition. The red-faced man said, I don't need your premonition, I just need your cooperation. Now follow me. Sin opened his mouth, but he didn't argue with the other party after all, but silently grasped the lightsaber at his waist, ready to welcome any unexpected arrival. But at this moment, the accident came. The red-faced man led the way, and walked straight in the middle of the square. His steps were extremely heavy, as if announcing his arrival. The people living in the sheds retreated, like small animals frightened by a giant beast. The red-faced man stopped walking when he reached the foot of the high wall. He reached out and stroked the rust on the wall, as if he was looking for some mechanism. But soon his face changed, and he turned around. Behind him, in the shadow of the mud, a tall Nikto slowly stood up. Are you looking for this thing, Clatuinian? The leader of the second group of dragon hunters laughed hoarsely. He held a square piece of metal in his hand, and the color just matched the gray thick wall. It's really interesting to see you acting carefully all the way, treating everyone as a rusty metalhead. But I knew from the beginning that it must be you. Only you, a dog under the hut, can help the wanted criminal escape. So no matter how hard you act, we will be waiting for you in the end. At the same time, behind Sangun, one dragon hunter warrior after another stood up. They were fully armed and murderous. But he didn't do it right away. When I came here, the leader told me that even Jedi apprentices can be killed, but you, even if you have to be killed, must be killed with dignity and confidence. Because your master once helped us a lot, this is also a necessary favor. The Nikto said, and spat. I hate this kind of favor exchange and profit calculations the most. So I will let you die with a clear conscience. According to the law of Li, anyone who harbors a wanted criminal will be killed without mercy. Even if your master comes, there is no exception. So where is the wanted criminal you are talking about? The red-faced man responded calmly. Even though he was surrounded from behind, and the blaster was pointed at his vitals, he still didn't feel the slightest fear. The Nikto didn't want to waste time talking to the other party, so he took 2 steps forward, squeezed the red-faced man away, and then reached out to lift the hood of the cloaked man. The face of a young woman in her 20s was revealed. Chapter 218 Professional Ethics. The face of the young and beautiful human woman under the hood made the Nikto man dazed for a moment. After a long time, in the unbearable silence, he rubbed his eyes hard to make sure he was not hallucinating, and then looked at the holographic projection in his hand, repeatedly comparing the face of the Jedi apprentice in the projection with the woman in front of him. Sanguin was not good at distinguishing human appearance, but even so, he at least knew that the wanted man was a male human in his 16s or 17s, while the one in front of him was a woman in her early 20s. So the more he compared, the more Sanguin realized that he might have fallen into the other party's trick. He angrily reached out to grab the woman and shouted, "What tricks are you playing?" However, his hand was tightly grasped in midair by the Clatuin man. "Don't touch my tenant." The red-faced man was not afraid of the dragon hunters around him. He pinched Sanguin's wrist and pried the arm of the strong Nikto man apart bit by bit. The Nikto man let out a painful and angry breath, but could only watch his palm get farther and farther away from the target. In a rage, the Nikto glared at the red-faced man and called out to his teammates, "You're just standing there and watching?" But his men hesitated and had no intention of responding. This not only made the Nikto angry, but also confused. There has never been a soft egg among the dragon hunters. Even Fiu, the leader of the previous group who was defeated, once rushed towards the thermal grenade with a wild laugh on the battlefield. In order to avenge the blue dragon, the dragon hunters had long given up human emotions. Even if they had to fight the Talhu with bare hands, the dragon hunters would not frown. So this hesitation must have encountered a huge problem. At this moment, Sanguine heard a familiar voice. Oh my, big news. The mysterious revenge organization, Dragon Hunters, has raised their butcher knives against civilians. This is truly a moral decline. Sanguine turned his head suddenly and growled in disbelief. It's you? Gang Suomen? The tall reporter from Cheyenne district showed a gratified smile. I didn't expect the great Dragon Hunters to remember my name. That's right, I'm Gang Suomen, a reporter from Cheyenne News, determined to expose all the darkness. Now, please answer me a small question. What are you going to do to the innocent lady over there? After a pause, Gang Suomen said again, of course, it doesn't matter. If you don't want to answer my questions, we can ask someone else. Beside Gang Suomen, there were several media people who carried interview equipment like him. Although most of them were not serious media people, this slick attitude made people feel more troubled than those regular media people. These guys here are all my friends. They are not very good at business, but they can still spread the news of what just happened throughout Cheyenne district in half a day. If you want to be famous, it's basically right to find us. Of course, if you are not satisfied with being famous in Cheyenne district, I also have a way for Cheyenne district. After saying that, Gang Suomen leaned to the side and saw a man curled up in the mud behind him slowly standing up. He exuded the stench of a garbage dump, and his eyes were not very lively, but when he spoke, he revealed an awe-inspiring aura. When did you Dragon Hunters become dogs for those powerful people? They offered you conditions that were hard to refuse, and then you were tempted, and did not hesitate to attack innocent people for this? What's the difference between what you did and King Lang? The stinking man spoke fiercely, and for a moment, Sanguine felt heavy pressure, as if he was suffocating. Who are you? Is my identity important? Do Dragon Hunters have to care about the other party's identity before answering questions? The man sighed, very disappointed. Gang Suomen shrugged and smiled, and even if I told you, you wouldn't know. Only people in our circle are familiar with Hang Jiangai's name. Every year when the company recruits new people, I have to warn them not to learn from Hang Jiangaiu. For the so-called truth and justice, he sacrificed his future and fell from the promising Cheyenne district to the slums. Moreover, he was not at peace in the slums, but went to the most rubbish places, calling it collecting materials. The problem is that no one cares about the materials here. Hang Jiangaiu ignored Gang Suomen's ridicule, but after this introduction, his presence was completely different from before. A once famous reporter, even if he was exiled from the upper class, his influence is still not to be underestimated. The most important thing is that the Dragon Hunter can no longer make trouble. The Nikto felt the heaviness of the air through the breathing tube and realized that he had finally fallen into the trap of the red-faced man. The other party had long expected that the Dragon Hunters would block them at the last checkpoint, so the previous acting was just a prelude. The core of the smuggling operation and the climax of the whole play was only in the last link. Before the Dragon Hunters showed up, he let Scene exchange identities with a real female tenant. Then, the red-faced man deceived everyone at the last moment. Sanguine's regret was burning fiercely, and he couldn't even figure out how he could be so easily fooled. Perhaps it was the reputation of the Clatuan people for being dogs for the huts for a long time that made him underestimate the other party too much, or perhaps it was because the Dragon Hunters were playing away in the Cheyenne district after all, and they were too easily confused by all kinds of mixed information. But these were just excuses. The Dragon Hunters only recognize success or failure, not excuses. Sanguine's regret had just burned, but he was forced to extinguish it. Retreat. Since the Jedi apprentice had been replaced, there was no point in staying here. However, it was not so easy for the Dragon Hunters to leave. As soon as the third supervisor issued the order, Gang Suomen interrupted with an exaggerated laugh. Ha ha ha, you raped a woman in broad daylight, and you wanted to escape after being exposed on the spot. You really think Lee is a place outside the law? Hang Jiangaiu also said, the Dragon Hunters are independent and have always been lawless, but this is Lee. After all, with clear laws, such blatant violations of the law are not in line with the usual style of the Dragon Hunters. So, the person who instructed you to act this time is in the city's upper echelons, right? When the third supervisor heard this, His breathing tube twitched unconsciously. Every word of this person named Hang Jiangai was like an energy beam, hot and deadly. It was indeed not a glorious thing for the dragon hunters to be driven by others this time, and their behind the scenes boss was even more secret. Not to mention being exposed. Just someone trying to expose this matter is an unforgivable omission for the dragon hunters. What's more, the person who dug up the secret was the famous Hang Jiangai. For a moment, the Nikto people really wanted to order everyone to be killed to silence them, but it was obvious that the other party would not leave such a serious omission when designing this trap. Who knows where there are more eyes watching all this. Once the action is taken, perhaps Gang Suomen, Hang Jiangai, and the red-faced man will die, but the silver hiding in the dark will definitely be happy to death. It's all a misunderstanding. We will submit relevant reports to the security department. The Nikto people suppressed their anger and said soft words. If you need compensation, you can also contact us afterwards. Compensation? Are you trying to tarnish our ethics as media people with dirty Kyankan coins? Gang Suomen walked in front of the Nikto people, tried to straighten his chest, and spoke righteous words, but the sneers of his colleagues beside him somewhat disintegrated the upright atmosphere. After being a media person in Cheyenne district for a long time, talking about ethics is usually a joke, but this kind of despicable and slick behavior made the dragon hunters even more uncomfortable. They couldn't beat this group of scum in front of them, nor could they ignore them. Every second they were dragged here by them was allowing the Jedi apprentice to escape further. Chapter 219 Meticulous. In the end, the dragon hunters got rid of the entanglement of Gang Suomen and others. Don't worry so much, withdraw as soon as possible. The decisive instructions from the leader allowed Sanguin to throw away his worries and violently disperse all the media people who were looking for trouble. The Nikto people used electric rods to directly electrocute several people around him and made them incontinent on the spot, and the rest of the people scattered in a slippery manner. As for the red-faced man, he kept his distance from the dragon hunters from beginning to end, just fulfilling his duties as a landlord. Just as the dragon hunters have their own concerns, the red-faced man also has to consider his boss behind him when doing things. His mission is to help Scene sneak into Rainbowport, not to continue to anger the dragon hunters. And he has done everything he can. Therefore, after forcibly breaking free from the entanglement of Gang Suomen and others, the dragon hunters team quickly withdrew to a temporary base. The third supervisor did not receive any more instructions from the leader, which was both relaxing and sad for him. The relaxation was that he did not have to face the leader with the shame of failure, but the sadness was that he did not even have the opportunity to defend himself. In his shame and annoyance, he discovered something that made him furious. Where is Fiu? Fiu, he just said that his stomach was uncomfortable. That pie donkey without heat dissipation holes. The third supervisor was furious. Does he still think he is the leader of the first action group? Why didn't anyone stop him? When we heard that sentence, he had already disappeared. Yes, leader, you know that the previous leader has always been elusive. If he wanted to run, no one could stop him. He is just a low-level soldier now, and I'm afraid he dare not bear your anger. The explanation of the subordinates seemed careless and insincere, especially those in the first and third groups, whose words were more obviously meant to make fun of him. Although the dragon hunters are known for their elites, they are not an organization that relies on honor and discipline. This group of warriors who came together for revenge will never be honest people, and Sanguin did not restrict the prestige of everyone. Sanguin was helpless about this. Now he could only hope that the fleeing Fiu would come back in disgrace, but he knew very well that it was impossible. Although Fiu was slippery, he rarely failed in a single action. Or conversely, Fiu was the most terrifying when he acted alone. He was not suitable to be a team leader from the beginning. Now the team led by Sanguin was played around by the Clatuan people and was destined to be futile. Then the only hope of the dragon hunters was Fiu. Sanguin hated Fiu, but at this time he could only pray for Fiu's success. Because he had had enough of this muddy city, he didn't have the patience to play hide and seek with a Jedi apprentice. His remaining life was used to burn all the blue dragon bastards to death. So, it would be best if Fiu could end it all quickly. At the same time, after the dragon hunters left, an exaggerated groan echoed in the square. The people affected by the 3-barreled electric rod rolled in the mud recklessly, emphasizing their own misery. Okay, stop shouting. This time, Boss Clatuin has offered a high reward. After the matter is over, let's go to District 1 for a big meal. Okay, I've been waiting for this sentence. The people who were rolling on the ground not long ago suddenly stood up excitedly, without any sign of injury. For these media people who hang around in the Cheyenne district, the skills of self-defense and life-saving are their specialties. They had made sufficient preparations long before they heard the news and arrived, including insulating armor plates, first aid spray, etc. Although there was some physical pain, compared with the big meal in District 1 and the promised dividends, the pain was not worth mentioning. Hey, red-faced boss, thank you very much. The red-faced man said, I'm not the one who paid. If you want to thank someone, thank this person. He pointed at the stinking man, and everyone, including Gangsu Omen, looked at Hong Jiangayu with puzzled eyes. The next moment, Hong Jiangayu smiled, showing a smile that was completely different from that of a sad reporter. As the smile bloomed, the middle-aged man with the vicissitudes of life gradually removed his disguise in front of everyone. He wiped off the mud on his face, and wiped off the wrinkles on his cheeks and eyes, revealing a young face. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you for your full cooperation. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Bajin Jiu Khan of the Silver Knights. Ah. Gangsu Omen looked confused. Wait, what Jiu Khan? Aren't you Han Jiangayu? That's my father. Bajin Jiu Khan said generously, and he has been dead for a long time. I'm glad that after his death, there are still so many colleagues in this city who are keen to expose the truth. Although I failed to inherit my father's mantle, I believe that my father's spirit in heaven will be comforted to see you. Oh. Gangsu Omen was still a little confused. He felt that the originally simple story suddenly became complicated, and he and everyone else were kept in the dark. This feeling was very uncomfortable. Although they were just poor media people in Cheyenne district, the theorem that the media holds the truth made them instinctively resist the fact that they were deceived. Actually, things are very simple. Bajin Jiu Khan said, my boss needs your help to catch someone. But there are too many people trying to catch him now. So while we are catching people, we also have to trip up our competitors, which is why we have the situation just now. A reporter couldn't help asking, is the person you want to catch the legendary Jedi apprentice? I heard that he is one of yours. Bajin Jiu Khan said, he was one of us before, so now we are in a hurry to catch him, and take him to Shiangsa New Dong to prove our innocence. Otherwise, it will be bad if people mistakenly think that the Knights are harboring terrorists. Someone couldn't help asking, I heard that you Bayan people are the most protective of your own, so why did you betray your own people this time? Bajin Jiu Khan replied, your own people. Someone who suddenly reveals his identity and puts the entire Bayan in a passive position doesn't seem like one of our own, right? And everyone knows that we Bayan people used to be taken care of by the Nan family. Now we find that the murderer suspected of killing Mr. Healy is lurking around us. How can we regard him as one of our own? Gangsu Omen asked, are you actually perfunctory with what you said? You are not telling the truth at all, right? Bajin Jiuqian smiled, spread out his hands, and revealed a small stack of cards containing Kyankan coins. Of course what I said is sincere. After all, I'm Han Jiangayu's child. Gangsu Omen immediately understood and took a card first, saying, I see. Then I wish you to catch the terrorist as soon as possible and clear your name. After Gangsu Omen and others left, Bajin Jiuqian restrained his smile and bowed slightly to the red-faced man. Thank you for your great help. Bayan will not forget it. Then, he shook his head and asked, well, can Scene be let out? There is no one else around. The red-faced man said, Scene is not here. Bajin Jiuqian widened his eyes. Not here? Didn't he exchange identities with this lady at the entrance of the square? Where can he run to in such a short time? And he is going to Rainbowport to join us and escape. This is the only way to go. What is there to run? The red-faced man said, the fact that the dragon hunters can stop me here means that this road is a dead end. I designed this trap in the square, not really expecting to have a decisive battle with them here. The best result is that they don't show up. Bajan Jiuqian said, there's nothing we can do. The old man from the Dragon Hunters seems to be serious about this. The Dragon Hunters under his command are really difficult to deal with, and we, the Silver people, can't move freely in the city for a reason, and we can't hold them back. The red-faced man said, I'm not blaming you, I'm just stating an objective fact. If the Dragon Hunters can stop me in Xianhuang District 5, they can stop Xin in Xiangsuan District. This smuggling passage is no longer safe. Bajan Jiuqian asked, but you must have other passages, right? Of course. Then where are they? Bajan Jiuqian said, turning on the holographic projection in his hand and projecting a three-dimensional map of the city. However, the Clatuan people did not answer his question. Red-faced senior, I don't mean to pry into your business secrets, but if you don't tell me where the passage is, I can't arrange for someone to pick him up. The Clatuan man said, really a pickup? Bajan Jiuqian was stunned for a moment, then laughed. Red-faced senior, are you on guard against us? We are partners. It was Bain who helped Xin escape from the beginning. If we want to do something bad to him, there has never been a partner in the world that is worthy of wholehearted trust. Besides, what you just said is not wrong. Is a person who betrayed you first really worthy of your efforts to rescue him? Maybe you just want to sell him out to save yourselves. Bajan Jiuqian was silent for a while, then smiled. That makes sense. We may just be using red-faced senior to guide Xin into the trap. When Xin is arrested, we catch the traitor, but red-faced senior fails in his mission. Not only will he lose his reputation for many years, but he will also have to pay us for breach of contract. He will lose both his reputation and his wealth. I haven't been on a mission in the Xianhuang district for a long time, and I almost forgot the working environment here. The red-faced man remained silent, obviously acquiescing to this possibility. But you are still worrying too much, Senior Red-faced. If we really want to murder Xin, there is no need to risk offending you. He was interrupted before he finished speaking. My mission is to send Xin to Rainbow Harbor safely. I don't care what you do to him after he arrives at Rainbow Harbor, but before that, no one can hinder my mission. Bajan Jiuqian fell silent again, and after a long time, he shook his head helplessly. Senior, you are meticulous in adhering to principles, and I admire you deeply. It's getting late, so I'll take my leave first. Otherwise I'm afraid I won't be able to get your backup plan to stop Xin in time. As he walked, Bajan Jiuqian muttered to himself, is there a familiar face missing from the group of dragon hunters just now? That person should not have died during the ambush in District 3 last time. Chapter 220 Tracking all the way. Not far from the square, Xin was wandering alone in the slum streets of Xianhuang District. When entering the square, he temporarily exchanged identities with the substitute woman arranged by the red-faced man. The other party faced the interception of the dragon hunters on his behalf, and he took the opportunity to leave the square. When the woman passed by him, she stuffed a map data disk in his hand, which marked a secret passage leading to Xiangsuan District in eye-catching colors. That was the red-faced man's backup plan. If the main plan didn't work, Xin had to immediately follow the map markings and go to Xiangsuan District from another passage. But on that road, no one could support him. For a wanted criminal who was alone and surrounded by enemies in the city, the difficulty of this road was self-evident, not to mention that the ominous premonition in Xin's heart never disappeared. The Jedi apprentice knew that his crisis was not resolved. Although the dragon hunters led by the third tube were caught by the red-faced man's plan and were temporarily thrown away, there was more than one group of dragon hunters, and there were more than just dragon hunters in this city who deserved vigilance. So he didn't rush to move forward along the road on the map, but deliberately wandered up and down in a relatively noisy block for a while, on the one hand, to collect information from passers-by, and on the other hand to confirm whether Red Face's escape route was effective. He didn't doubt the Clatuan people, but even the powerful Red Face was not omnipotent. In fact, the temporary response in the square showed that the Red Face's plan had been seen through. The other party could see through the Red Face's main plan, and of course they could also see through the backup plan. If they were blocked on the road again, there would be no Red Face. to arrange an emergency plan. Fortunately, Scene's gains along the way were optimistic. Judging from the conversations of pedestrians, although the wanted notice for Scene had been spread, it did not affect the people in Shianhuang district. Perhaps, as Hubo said, those who could blow up Shiangsa and Yudong were all heroes, or perhaps for the lower class people, they already needed to do their best to live a good daily life, and they had no extra energy to care about anything else. In short, Scene did not fall into the vast ocean of people's war. In addition, the side effects of his self-exposure to the media 2 days ago were also sharply reduced. The discussion about the GD did not spread, and even many people in the slums did not know about it at all, as if the media carnival in the black and white streets not long ago was just a dream. Faintly, Scene felt that the GD was being deliberately suppressed. In any case, the situation was favorable to him. He just had to be careful and not attract attention. Just as Scene was about to set off along the map mark, his wrist suddenly trembled, and his wristband received a message. The sender was a familiar anonymous user. Not long ago, during the escape battle in Shiangsa and Yudong, this account sent him warnings twice in an emergency, allowing him to avoid the trap of Blackwing. This time it was another warning letter. The dragon hunters have already set their sights on you. Fiu, the leader of the previous group, is acting alone. He is an expert in tracking. Scene's heart shuddered, and he felt that the ominous sign that was originally looming seemed to collapse rapidly and converge to a point. He subconsciously turned his head to the side, looking over the crowded crowd, and his eyes met with a middle-aged man who was standing in front of a fruit stall picking fruits. Those were a pair of sleepy eyes, making people feel that the owner of the eyes didn't care about anything. Only the most perceptive people could capture the laser-like burning core from those lifeless eyes. And Scene happened to have this keen observation, and he had seen similar eyes before, and Ping's eyes. In an instant, Scene realized that he had found the pursuer in the warning letter, and that pursuer had already locked onto him. In front of the fruit stand, the middle-aged man put down 2 physical Kyankan coins in an orderly manner, and took away a brightly colored 4-phase fruit. Then, while chewing the juicy fruit, he walked towards Scene without question. Scene turned his back and quickly disappeared into the crowd. He was not far away from Fiu. Although there was a crowded crowd between them, this obstacle was not worth mentioning for the experienced warrior, especially Fiu's thin body, which made him easy to move among the crowd. Scene was already very good at moving in a crowd, but he didn't walk far before he found that the distance between him and Fiu was rapidly shortening. Unfortunately, the complex terrain and the crowded crowds around him could not provide any cover. Fiu was very tall and had a good visual advantage. Once his careless eyes fixed on a target, they would never let go. Scene subconsciously reached out to touch the lightsaber at his waist, but quickly let go. A head-on conflict was the worst option. Not to mention that the other party was not guilty of a capital crime. Even if he was really an unforgivable person, it would be absolutely disadvantageous for him, a wanted criminal, to start a war in such a crowded place. Thinking of this, Scene suddenly reached out to a tall and strong man who was walking towards him and whispered, "The tall man stole your wallet." The strong man looked confused for a while. "He stole my money." After that, the strong man shook his head, and everything in his vision gradually faded away, leaving only a tall and thin middle-aged man. He took a deep breath and shouted loudly, "Catch the thief. That man stole my money." Then, he rushed towards Fiu, while trying to separate the crowd. The crowd was in chaos. The people who were forcibly pushed away by the strong man began to cry and shout. The shop owner who was squeezed into the stall by the staggering crowd began to curse, and Fiu showed an unexpected smile. The strong man staggered to Fiu and stretched out his arms to try to grab the thief, but Fiu just turned sideways to avoid him. With a push on the strong man's back with his slender arms, he lost his balance and fell forward. But before the strong man fell to the ground, Fiu reached out and grabbed his straps, making the strong man's confused face stop just less than 10 centimeters from the ground. Then, Fiu hooked a soft cloth bag from the strong man's belt and smiled. "Look carefully next time. Your wallet is always on the belt." After that, Fiu ignored the confused strong man and continued to move forward. During the whole process, the crowd didn't even have a chance to attack him. He cleared his grievances and continued to chase. However, even with such a clean and neat handling, there was still a tiny gap in Fiayu's pursuit. When Fiayu turned his eyes back to the front, the GD apprentice in the cloak had disappeared without a trace. Hide and seek, I like it too. I hope you can let me have fun, Fiayu said, putting a thermal imaging lens on his face, with a smile on his face, but his voice was already filled with impatience. He never liked playing hide and seek, especially playing hide and seek with people who had nothing to do with Blue Dragon. But now that the leader's will is set, all he can do is to end it all as soon as possible and let the dragon hunters return to the asteroid belt to hunt down the group of interstellar pirates who can never be killed. As an experienced tracking expert, Fiayu can easily see the flaws left by Scene. Although the GD apprentice sees the momentary gap and hid himself, he didn't have time to erase all the traces. Fiayu's lifeless eyes quickly passed through the crowded crowd and locked onto the footprints on the ground. The footprints of the GD apprentice were eye-catching enough even in such a crowded and chaotic place. Earlier, when Scene was unaware of Fiayu's tracking, Fiayu had already firmly locked onto him and bribed a few street urchins with a Kyankan coin and a string of Kaneo chicken skewers, and threw a soft and juicy 4-phase fruit at Scene's feet. The juice of the 4-phase fruit will produce a slight heat when it meets the metal. If a person steps on the 4-phase juice and walks on the metal ground, the footprints will be particularly eye-catching, such as seen now. What's more, the well-trained body of the GD apprentice gave him a very unique rhythm of footsteps. Whether it was the distance between steps or the depth of the footprints, it was out of tune with the surrounding environment in the eyes of experts. The GD apprentice might be able to use various means to confuse the people around him, so Fiayu did not expect to rely on those easily bribed spies in the slums to stare at the other party, but Scene could not confuse Fiayu's tracking technology. So what follows is a calm pursuit. Chapter 221 Change of Plan. As the leading tracking expert among the dragon hunters, Fiayu chased the light red footprints at the fastest speed, from the bustling commercial street to a complex tall residential building. This concrete structure is full of slum style, chaotic and shaky, and thousands of residents are crowded in this limited space, which is the best stage for fishing in troubled waters. Scene's footprints disappeared at the door of the building. Fiayu took a look and gave the GD apprentice an unquestionable high score in his heart, and then followed him in without hesitation. The moment he entered the door, a gust of wind blew from the top of his head. Fiayu raised his arm without surprise and blocked the sneak attack with the short stick hidden in his sleeve. The strong impact only made Fiayu's upper body shake slightly. His lower body did not move at all. He just propped up his arms and pushed the GD apprentice who fell from the sky away, and then showed a mocking smile. Show mercy, GD apprentice. Where's your lightsaber? The GD apprentice's sneak attack failed, and he threw away a discarded metal stick he picked up and persuaded, just lie down honestly, it's better for both you and me. Fiayu said, that won't work. Although I don't have any opinion about you personally, my mission now is to capture you, and it's my duty. It's better for you to lie down honestly, it's better for both you and me. Scene said, you can say that you fought alone and lost because of exhaustion. It's not shameful to lose to a GD apprentice. Haha, the confidence of young people is really enviable, but it's a pity that you should use your brain when you speak. If I really lose to you as a matter of course, then why should I track you down alone? Wouldn't it be better to learn from that Nikto and be surrounded by people wherever I go? Scene stared at the tall and thin man, observing every detail of him, and at the same time tentatively said, maybe you dislike those bloated teammates who can't keep up with you, or maybe you don't mobilize the popularity of others at all, or maybe I'm enough alone. Before he finished speaking, Fiayu had already taken the initiative to pounce on him. His movements were so fast that Scene was surprised, even though he had been prepared. His speed was even faster than Enping's. But the GD apprentice at this time would certainly not be scared by this sudden speed. He had already seen that his opponent was extraordinary. Whether it was the sharpness he showed in the previous tracking, or the strange strength of his arms when dealing with the sneak attack, it meant that his single combat power was not inferior to those elites in the Red Apricot squad. However, for the GD apprentice today, it could not be an obstacle. While Fiayu was charging, Scene had already stretched out his hand. The next moment, Fiu's momentum stopped, and the whole person floated in the air, as if he was weightless. This process lasted only a moment, and then he flew backwards at a faster speed, and his body slammed heavily into a pile of abandoned furniture, stirring up a cloud of dust. The residents around him immediately heard the news and rushed over, but they could only see a tall and thin man lying in a mess in the garbage dump. It took Fiu a while to stand up. He touched his chest, and forced a twisted smile. Is this the GD? No wonder the people of Kyankan group are so scared. An apprentice is so powerful. Why hasn't that Mostima killed all the people on the board of directors yet? As he spoke, he stretched his muscles and bones. The onlookers who were watching with doubts seemed to be non-existent to him. With that kind of unreasonable power, it seems that there is no chance of winning in close combat. What a pity. This is my best field, and I want to see the power of the lightsaber. Then, Fiu shook his head from side to side, making his neck bones make a crisp sound. But at this time, he still showed mercy to the enemy. No wonder he has such a powerful force, but has become a stray dog. If possible, I don't want to be an enemy of such a person. Unfortunately, you are too much of a hindrance. At the end of the speech, Fiu had restrained his expression, and his temperament became more gloomy. If you can't capture him alive, don't blame me for killing him. After saying that, the tall and thin middle-aged man stretched his hands behind him, and his good flexibility allowed his palms to almost close behind his back. Then, he pulled out a blaster that was split into 2 pieces and assembled it into one in his hand. Legend has it that GD Knights are not afraid of bullets, but I don't know if it's true or not. Let's verify it today. After getting rid of Fiu, Scene's way forward became much smoother. He no longer had to worry about the pursuers, and could move at full speed according to the escape route left by the red-faced man. First, he went all the way up to the top floor of the intricate concrete building, and then cleverly climbed onto a suspended freight track, and with the cover of a fully automatic freight truck, he approached Cheyenne District 3. In the most dangerous area of Cheyenne District, there is an abandoned underground warehouse, which contains a maintenance passage that goes directly to Cheyenne District 9. This is a legacy left over from the prosperous period of District 9, and it is also one of the trump cards of the red-faced man. Compared to directly crossing the high wall that looked like a beheaded head, this smuggling passage has a longer route and more uncontrollable risks. All secret passages leading to Cheyenne District 9 have uncontrollable risks. But Scene had no better choice at this time. Fortunately, he did not encounter more twists and turns along the way. Although there were many mercenaries pursuing bounties and civilian security patrols along the way, no one could see through Scene's identity. The GD apprentice took the word disguise to the extreme, just like he did when he held Lei Yangson hostage alone before. When the GD apprentice arrived at Cheyenne District 3, there were even drunk people who mistook him for a guest and called him a tailhead. Scene readily accepted this insult. After arriving at the abandoned underground warehouse, Scene felt that the sense of crisis lingering in his heart was gradually dissipating. Obviously, even the tracking expert Fiu had been left far behind by him. At the same time, there was no new warning from the wristband, which finally made him feel relieved. Although there is no evidence to prove that the anonymous account is credible, at least the 3 warnings so far have provided him with considerable help. Next, just as Scene was about to confirm the map, his wristband suddenly trembled. The 4th letter came, and the content was simple. The road from Cheyenne District 9 to District 7 is blocked. Scene's heart trembled, realizing that the crisis was only temporarily away, and the road ahead would not be easy. The map left by the red-faced man required Scene to go to Cheyenne District 9 and immediately use the abandoned secret passages that led in all directions to District 7, and then use the freight channel in District 7 to rush to Hanke Port. The route planned by the red-faced man did not require Scene to remain unchanged, but the core of the escape was locked in District 9 and District 7. Leaving these 2 transportation hubs, there would be no escape. But now, the path from District 9 to District 7 is blocked. Chapter 222 Anonymous Account. Scene pondered for a moment, and did not question the authenticity of the information. On the one hand, there was no reason to question it, and on the other hand, there was no need to question it, although it was a serious problem that he could not go to District 7. It was not unsolvable. Sin was not unfamiliar with the geography of Xiangsuan district. After all, he had fought his way from District 9 to Nirvana alone, and was fully capable of independently planning a route to Hankai Port. Although he certainly could not do it as well as the red-faced man, there was no better choice at this time. After making up his mind, Sin immediately stepped up and quickly moved towards District 9 along the abandoned passage. The Jedi apprentice's mobility was extremely amazing. He quickly walked to the end of the long passage, and when he returned to Xiangsuan District 9 again, Sin could not help but feel emotional. In just a few days, he had experienced too many things, and his state of mind had changed almost completely. Unfortunately, now was not the time to immerse himself in emotion. Thanks to the warning in the wristband, Sin carefully avoided the places related to District 7 and found a route to District 8 from the red-faced man's map. What he saw and heard along the way more or less confirmed the credibility of the anonymous warning. Sin could see mercenaries pouring in from other places and various places, and the places directly connected to District 7 were openly blocked, so the arrangements in secret could be imagined. Fortunately, District 8 had a loophole after all, and Sin went through some twists and turns, and came to the streets of District 8 along a purified sewer. The moment he walked from underground to the ground, a dazzling brilliance bloomed in front of him, and countless neon lights illuminated the streets in a variety of colors. His ears were filled with festive music played loudly by various stores, and his head was accompanied by rumbling explosions and muffled sounds, and gorgeous fireworks bloomed from time to time. Sin was stunned for a moment, realizing that Xiangsuan District 8 was celebrating a festival, and from the passionate advertising slogans, he could vaguely tell that it was the most important gathering festival of Li. Ah, yes, today is a gathering festival. This space city was originally transformed from 5 large, almost abandoned spaceships. Later, due to various opportunities, more and more spaceships joined in and were transformed into various functional modules of the city. As the city continued to expand, Li gradually became a trade hub between Kun and Zun, and even a port for external exchanges for the entire galaxy. Today, the city no longer needs to rely on abandoned spaceships to expand its scale. It has a very complete industrial production system inside, but history is forever engraved in the form of culture. For Li, nothing is more important than gathering and unity. Every year's gathering festival also arouses more joy among locals than other statutory holidays. Looking at the countless smiling faces on the street, Sin felt as if he were in another world. What he saw and heard in Xianhuang district not long ago seemed to be an illusion, or perhaps what was in front of him was an illusion. In a dreamlike state, Sin subconsciously leaned to the side. A beam of scorching energy flew past his cheek and hit a spark under his feet. The dazzling light and shadow were soon drowned in the lights and feasting. People on the street only thought that the light flashing on the corner of the street was some special fireworks, and they didn't realize that someone would shoot in the civilian area of the gathering festival. But for Sin, the disaster of death was just a brush. The extremely thin sense of crisis enveloped Sin again in an instant. He felt that every hair on his body stood up, and Fiu's indifferent eyes vaguely appeared in his mind. He suddenly stepped back, as if he wanted to hide in the shelter at the entrance of the sewer. However, just as he took a step, his center of gravity swayed in the air, and an incredible convergence force burst out from his waist and abdomen, forcibly solidifying the Jedi apprentice's figure, and then turned back to the front. At the same time, a beam of energy fell behind him predictably, and sparks burst out again where he should have landed. Sin immediately seized the opportunity, took 2 steps forward, and squeezed into the crowd on the street. The sniper did not follow again. After all, Fiu was not Xiaozi, and he was not crazy enough to ignore the casualties of civilians. However, Sin was only slightly relieved before he became nervous again. The cover of the crowd was only temporary. The street celebration of the gathering festival would come to an end sooner or later, and the crowd would gradually disperse. Moreover, there were only such dense crowds on the main roads in the entire District 8. Once he left the main roads, the threat of flying fish would immediately follow him. And the main roads in District 8 did not lead to Rainbow Harbor. Scene considered using the cover of the crowd to change his identity again with disguise, but when he thought of flying fish's tracking ability, he gave up this futile attempt. The other party was able to track all the way from Cheyenne District to Cheyenne District 8. This tracking ability was incredible, and ordinary disguises could not hide it from him at all. At this moment, Scene's wristband vibrated again, and the anonymous account sent a new message. Go to the viewing stand along the main road and wait for my response. Scene couldn't help but look gloomy. This was the first time that the anonymous account sent instructions instead of warnings, and it was also the first time that the name I appeared in the message. Is it because the other party noticed that Scene was in a passive situation, so they had to increase their support? Or has there been a new change? Unfortunately, the Jedi apprentice has no time to consider the identity of the anonymous account now, and no matter what the other party is sending the message for, the content is worth referring to. Scene opened the map and carefully observed the terrain of District 8. As the anonymous person said, continue along the main road and you will soon reach the viewing platform. That is the closest place to Bérgamo in Cheyenne District 8. Not only can you see the energy core of the entire city, but you can also see the famous Galaxy Square. The square is a political landmark of Lee. Every piece of floor comes from the abandoned spacecraft that first formed this city. In the 2000 years of the city's history, several major historical turning points are directly related to Galaxy Square, and its political significance is extraordinary. So now on every major festival, the rulers of Lee will speak to everyone at Galaxy Square. The voice of the political leader will be transmitted to every corner of the city through the broadcasting system. Of course, it may also be every corner, except the bottom of Cheyenne District. In fact, if Scene excludes the noise of the loud music and the crowds on the street, he can hear the speech on the square now. I'm very happy that in the past year, our city has continued to prosper and develop with the efforts of all citizens. Chen Yao's voice came out through a worn-out speaker with a little distortion. His holographic projection was also illuminated by the surrounding neon advertisements, which made it flicker from time to time. People on the street were immersed in the atmosphere of shopping and carnival, and not many people cared about the city leader's rhetoric. But in Scene's eyes, the picture in the projection still had clear political significance. Chen Yao was still the leader of Lee, and although his position was seriously challenged, he still maintained his position. Behind him stood the challenger Zhang Jincheng, who had a stiff smile on his face and looked lost. More important than these two people was a young woman standing on the other side of Chen Yao. Nan Wuao. Chapter 223. It's good to be alive. Scene was extremely surprised to see her here. The little princess of the Nan family actually took the initiative to stand on the stage and seemed to have reached an agreement with Chen Yao and stood on the same side. As Nan Hela's successor, she inherited the inheritance unexpectedly quickly, which was undoubtedly a benefit to Scene. If you want to find out the death of Nan Heli and the secrets hidden within the Kyankan group, someone will need to provide sufficient political resources. In fact, if Nan Heli's political resources could be more reliable, the Jedi Masters and apprentices would not have been framed. Just after arriving in the Kyan Galaxy, Scene quickly turned his attention back from the flickering projection. If you want to care about Nan Wuao's movements, you can do it anytime, but you can't do it now, when you can't protect yourself. The Jedi apprentice tried to locate Fiu while moving in the direction of the crowd. However, the opponent's counter-reconnaissance experience was very rich. After the first wave of snipers missed, they immediately moved their positions and used the complex three-dimensional buildings in the Cheyenne 8th district to hide themselves perfectly. This feeling of not being able to grasp the key points makes Scene very uncomfortable. When the enemy is in the dark, and we are clear, every step is accompanied by risks, and he has no time to take every step now. However, at this moment, an unusually harsh siren suddenly sounded in the distance, and several airships with warning bells overhead were seen roaring towards a tall building. Several dazzling headlights shined on the top floor, illuminating half of the wall in a dazzling white color. A middle-aged security soldier in black armor stood on the side of the airship, holding a loudspeaker, and shouted, "Sniper, you have been surrounded. Immediately put down your weapons and surrender." Scene couldn't help but widen his eyes when he heard that, because of that, the owner of the voice was none other than Zhejiang, the leader of the city's only officially designated security organization. The Jedi apprentice never imagined that when he was in the most difficult time, it was Zhejiang who descended from the sky to resolve the crisis for him. This matter makes absolutely no sense logically. The people who are currently trying to arrest Scene all over the city are the Kyankan group, and the dragon hunters are just minions of the group. So why did Zhejiang, a loyal dog of the group, suddenly raise his gun against his peers? Vicious competition? Or is there someone in city management helping? As I thought about it, riots began to brew in the streets. The appearance of Zhejiang and others obviously disrupted the festive atmosphere of the reunion festival, and some citizens began to panic. But soon, various public projection devices on the street projected Azure City announcements, telling citizens to be calm and calm. The security work will be limited to a small area, and will not affect the order of the city. This announcement quickly alleviated the panic of the citizens, and some idle people simply watched the excitement. Anyway, the place where the incident happened was far away from the bustling downtown area. The people of Shiangsuan district, who had been at peace for a long time, did not feel that there was any risk at all. Instead, they found this kind of security wanted scene to be particularly exciting. Zhejiang, who was temporarily recruited and focused on the public, was obviously in a bad mood, and his words through the loudspeaker were also extremely merciless. "Fiu, do you have to ask me to name you before you stand up? Shooting in the downtown area, is this what you dragon hunters do? Stand up now, and you will be responsible for your actions. Otherwise I will immediately issue a wanted order for all dragon hunters." However, there was no response from the building surrounded by airships. "If you're brave enough, just hide here and don't move. Guayu, go notify the Ministry of Defense and use the railgun to knock down all the dragon hunters' spaceships." As soon as he finished speaking, an energy beam came from the window of the building. It shot out and knocked out the trumpet in Zhejiang's hand. Zhejiang was not afraid at all. He threw away the melted trumpet and picked up the blaster from his side, showing an extremely irritable expression. "You lawless thugs, just die here." Then the squadron leader fired back with a precise shot, shooting through a window of the building. But of course, the flying fish behind the window had long since disappeared without a trace. However, Zhejiang's counterattack was just a signal. The two airships beside him immediately landed and aimed their heavy weapons at the various entrances and exits of the building. Zhejiang himself led a team of soldiers, jumped from the airship, and landed on the top floor of the building, preparing to capture or kill the flying fish with his own hands. Facing the aggressive security squadron led by Zhejiang, the former leader of the dragon hunters, who was good at tracking, had no chance to shine. This was a godsend opportunity for Scene. When the security squadron and the dragon hunters were having serious internal strife, Scene had already taken advantage of the chaos and quickly approached the viewing platform. At this time, the entire city's reunion festival celebration has reached its climax. At Galaxy Square, Chen Yao had finished reading a long congratulatory message. He raised the sacrificial wine cup in his hand to symbolize the eternal decline of the city towards Buzhou, and then poured it onto the square, rippling with reflections as fine as a galaxy. This scene was clearly presented to most corners of the city through countless public projection installations. At this moment, the whole city burst into cheers. More fireworks were lit, and at this moment, the sky over the entire city was dazzlingly white. In addition to Buzhou and dry stars, the city had a new source of light. And close to the viewing platform, hundreds of floating lighthouses made their debut, performing the final performance of the reunion festival. These floating lighthouses were transformed from airships and have very flexible power devices and dazzling lighting equipment. Under the control of a skilled pilot, you can perform wonderful flying performances around Buzhou. The fixed program of the reunion festival every year is the place spaceships gather, and the city is birth performed by these floating lighthouses. Scene crossed the crowded crowd and came all the way to the edge of the auditorium. Looking at the floating lighthouse that passed by the edge of the auditorium at that time, he couldn't help but think about it. The anonymous account said that he would be waiting for his response here. What kind of response was that? Want him to jump onto the floating lighthouse? The moment this thought appeared, he felt his eyes sting slightly from being shaken by someone. A floating lighthouse not far away cast a beam of light directly at him. Scene immediately understood that this was the response of the anonymous account. So he no longer hesitated and jumped when the floating lighthouse approached. The exclamations from ordinary citizens behind him were like a farewell march. Scene rode the wind, adjusted his posture in midair, and landed easily on the suspended lighthouse, and his figure was quickly obscured by the strong light. The citizens who saw this scene on the viewing platform wiped their eyes and thought they were seeing hallucinations. Scene saw the person who answered him from the driver's seat of the lighthouse. 9,000 platinum. Although the facial features and contours of the young man in front of him were different from the last time they met on Black and White Street, Scene could still clearly identify his identity. But this time, Beijing lost his good expression before. When he saw Scene, a twitching smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Scene, you, a newcomer, can really cause trouble for others. How do you feel about leaving the planned route and insisting on finding another way? Do you look down on the biggest smuggling expert in this city? Do you know how to invite a red face? How much did it cost us to design the escape route? Scene was stunned by this direct rebuke and quickly connected the clues in his mind. Sure enough, Hang Lion was hired by Bei Yin. Otherwise, you expected Black and White Street. Can those little slum bosses invite the Klaatuin people? Do you really think of him as an honest landlord? Beijing said, the first route was blocked by the dragon hunters. Although the situation is unfavorable, it still counts. As expected, the second route is safe, from Xianhuang District to District 9, and then to District 7 and finally to Hankai Port. Scene said, someone warned me that District 7 has been blocked. Ah. Beijing was stunned. Early warning. Who? I don't know. It's an anonymous message, but the previous warnings were accurate, so I took it for granted, and I was indeed in District 7 when I escaped. I saw a large number of mercenaries, and because I was worried that the dragon hunters were ambushing heavy troops there, I temporarily changed the route and diverted to the 8th district. Platinum Geokian widened his eyes and said in surprise, yes, there were indeed many people at that time. Being temporarily transferred to District 7, I wondered whether the red-faced man was unlucky or whether his backup plan had been seen through. But the problem is, I was there at the time. Scene also widened his eyes. Are you here? Nonsense. If the plan changes, of course you have to adapt. Otherwise, wouldn't the money we spent on the red-faced man be in vain? You were too stupid to rush in. I spent a lot of effort to clear away the soldiers near the escape route and be ready to respond. Your temporary lane change wasted all my efforts. After a pause, Beijing asked, what happens next? The anonymous message asked you to avoid the 7th district. Do you have any other instructions? Scene said, after I arrived in the 8th district, I was pestered by Fiu. But as soon as he took action, he was pestered by Kayankan security. Then, the anonymous account asked me to go to the viewing platform to wait for a response. I thought the anonymous message was from Liu. Beijing denied. Boss Li is not that free. I'm solely responsible for the response work. I also exhausted my last resources and reluctantly took the floating lighthouse to the 8th district. As a result, I saw you standing stupidly on the viewing platform. Having said this, Beijing face turned serious. Interesting. It seems that the so-called supporter of that anonymous account is me. Even me. Everyone is being manipulated by this anonymous account. This person, his ability is not simple. Scene also said, it's not unusual to be able to grasp my movements. After all, Fiu has been keeping an eye on me. That anonymous person may have similar tracing methods, or he may simply be hunting dragons. There are informants in the center, but it's a bit unbelievable that someone can instruct Kayankan security to take action. Considering the several early warnings in Chiangsu and Jade Hall, I feel that the identity of that person is about to be revealed. Platinum Geokian also gradually deduced the truth. TSK, no wonder he didn't show up on such a politically significant festival today. Instead, he pushed Nan Wuai to the front and partnered with Chen Yao to gain political prestige. Did it turn out that he had been operating secretly all along? This guy's indeed not as honest and simple as he seems. Boss Li's guess is right. Scene asked, "What did Li Yu say?" Beijing Jiuqian said, "The living are always more powerful than the dead. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 224. I'm fine. As the last performance of the Gathering Festival came to an end, Beijing Jiu Kan drove the floating lighthouse to complete the set performance task and followed the other lighthouses to the hangar in the industrial area far away from the Zhuanghuang district. The huge hangar was deserted at this time. Most of the staff left their posts and went to the bustling commercial district of the city to celebrate the festival. The ones who stayed in the industrial area were mainly some diligent and unconcerned technician robots. Each lighthouse has an independent maintenance workshop. This kind of flying props, which are only used on certain festivals, pay more attention to political propaganda value than economic value. In other words, politicians can do enough with the fiscal budget. For example, they can place large orders with their own manufacturing companies to build completely unnecessary independent workshops and supporting maintenance equipment, or place dispatch orders with their own human resources companies to hire a group of senior engineers who never come to work. All of this makes the hangar, where the lighthouse is stored, a security loophole in the city. When Scene followed Beijing Jiu Kan down the lighthouse and stepped on the white metal floor of the workshop, he saw many familiar faces. There was Kao Yang Kang, a veteran who had fought side by side with him. He had a bandage on his head and a piece of tape on his face. He grinned at Scene. Next to him, a strong-looking woman was staring at Scene. Behind them, there was a taller but immature young man. Scene couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he saw that Kao Yang Kang and his family were safe. In addition, there were Chen Sanwen and Huang Siwen, the mechanics on the Bayan, and many unfamiliar faces. The team that greeted him was unexpectedly large. The man at the front of the team, about 30 years old, with a face full of joking and mocking, was Li Yu, the leader of the Bayan organization. Seeing Li Yu again, Scene was filled with emotion, and the only thing he could say was the simple word sorry. No need to apologize. It's worthless and I wouldn't think it takes up much space, even if you give it to me. This is not the first time we've dealt with each other. You don't need me to remind you what to do next. Scene sighed and said, "I will bear all the losses." Li Yu said, "That's easy to say, but how are you going to bear the loss of 10 million? Have you calculated how many tons of offal you have to sell to make back the 10 million? Scene did not refute Li Yu's price of 10 million, nor did he pay attention to the ridicule about selling offal, let alone any empty talk like devoting himself to the cause until his death. He gave a very reasonable plan. "The Nan family can help me pay the debt." Damn, the Nan family? Li Yu couldn't help but put his hands up to cover his face. How did you set your sights on the Nan family? You don't think that they will go bankrupt and marry you just because you saved the young lady once? Besides, the young lady's current financial situation is not very optimistic. This time, the Silver Knights were hired with temporary loans. Why do you think she will help you pay 10 million? However, before Li Yu finished speaking, a familiar voice suddenly sounded behind him. "I will pay his debt. I can still afford 10 million Kyankan coins." Li Yu and Scene turned their heads in surprise at the same time, only to see that Li Yu's robot assistant was raising his wrist and presenting the holographic projection of Nan Wuya in front of everyone. The woman in the projection had not had time to change out of her gorgeous dress for the Gathering Festival ceremony. There was a trace of fatigue on her delicate face, but her eyes still looked high-spirited. Li Yu asked, "Miss, don't you have to host the Gathering Festival dinner?" Nan Wuya said, "My second uncle has already given me the most prominent link. I can't be too greedy. Besides, I have already made enough political capital. It is just a waste of time to flatter those local dignitaries at the dinner." Well, let's get back to the topic. I will pay Scene's debts, and 10 million Kyankan coins will be transferred to your account tomorrow. Liu was silent for a while and said, Miss, you are generous and rich. I would like to thank you on behalf of Scene. By the way, I would like to ask for the secret recipe for getting rich. How did you raise 10 million in such a short time? Nan Wuiyao said, I promised Chen Yao a stable retirement life, so he is naturally happy to invest in me. Liu laughed and said, you are worthy of being a loser in the political struggle. You are the president of a city, but you have fallen to the point where a girl in her 20s blackmailed your retirement fund. What is the amount of the first investment? Nan Wuiyao didn't care about keywords such as political struggle and blackmail at all, and answered openly, 15 million. After paying your balance and redeeming Scene, I will be penniless. And before I fulfill my promise, Chen Yao will not make additional investments for the time being, so don't expect me to give you bonuses. Although your escort work is beautiful, there are too many complications. It's good enough that I don't pursue the liability for breach of contract. Liu laughed, as expected of the eldest lady of the Nan family. You are really good at bargaining. Well, since you are willing to invest in Scene, I have no objection. After that, Liu opened her arms to Scene. Welcome back, our hero. Scene was only amused and helpless at this warm welcome. He declined Liu's embrace, turned sideways, and said to Nan Wuiyao, thank you. Nan Wuiyao just smiled. You're welcome. I'm just generous to repay the grace of saving my life. Scene certainly didn't think that the eldest daughter of the Nan family would spend tens of millions of dollars for a temporary favor when the silver ship was attacked. This money is more like an investment than a repayment, and the object of investment is certainly not a young man who is less than 20 years old. Nan Wuiyao invested in his status as a Jedi apprentice. However, there are some details that Scene couldn't figure out. First of all, the investment was too generous and straightforward. A payment of 10 million in one go was not at all delicate for the powerful class, because a more reasonable way is to pay in installments, so that Scene can maintain long-term constraints. Secondly, Nan Eugen's previous warnings were of great significance to Scene. Whether it was a repayment or an investment, it was more than enough. If Nan Eugen and Nan Wuiyao were in the same camp, then the investment of 10 million would be a bit redundant. At this time, Scene had secrets and doubts in his heart, so he decided to be open and honest, not only to Nan Wuiyao, but also to Liu and everyone in the Silver Knights. I know you have a lot of questions, and I will answer them this time. Liu sneered and said, no, I have no problem. Chapter 225, A Chance of Encounter. Scene was surprised. No problem? Aren't you surprised why I suddenly left the Red Apricot Squad? In addition, about my wanted order. No, I'm not interested. Liu said in a calm tone. I'm just the head of a civilian organization. Taking care of my subordinates' food, clothing, housing and transportation has exhausted me physically and mentally. I really don't have the energy to care about the mission of the Justice Messengers. As for the wanted order, do you think it's rare? Bei, show it to him. Another three-dimensional projection lit up on Bei's wrist, and Liu was seen sitting upright in a neat and tidy manner, and an astronomical bounty was displayed above his head. Scene was shocked. You are also wanted. Liu said, you don't really think that the Silver Knights are a good organization? Did we first meet at a charity event in the nursing home? Scene was speechless. He and Liu first met at Nanhel's Manor. At that time, the pirates led by Suzaku killed, burned, and looted. Although the silver did not participate in the frontal battle, it definitely did not uphold justice. In addition, after you joined the Red Apricot team, were your tasks carried out within the framework of abiding by laws and regulations? Scene was even more speechless. They first ran to Shiangsa New Dong to openly threaten Zhang Jincheng, and then simply rushed to the secret military base of Kyankan Security and held a regional leader hostage. Even new grassroots operators are lawless. How can I, as a leader, be clean? So don't show off your wanted warrant. Almost everyone here has one. Scene asked curiously. In that case, how do you maintain normal activities? What's normal? Do you think living in the abandoned area is normal, or driving the silver ship all day long is normal? With my talent, if I can maintain normal activities, I should be holding an important position in the Kyankan group and living a refined and luxurious upper-class life. Liu laughed at himself a few times and then said, the glamour of the Silver Knights is only limited to the underground world. If you want to walk in the surface world, almost every step must be weighed and carefully calculated. It is thanks to an employer like the eldest lady that we can appear in the public eye like today. Nan Wuiao said, you're welcome. Liu said again, so, there is no need to consider what trouble you have caused us. When I picked you up and brought you back to the Silver Knights, I expected that there would be trouble. You don't owe us anything in this regard. And the part you owe us, the eldest lady has just helped you pay it off. Then, Liu leaned forward slightly, looked into Sin's eyes seriously, and asked, so, you are free here with me? Sin was stunned for a moment. Free? Now that your debt is paid off, you are no longer bound by the Silver Knights. You can go wherever you want. Unless you are willing to stay here and be with us, a group of lawless wanted criminals. Sin did not avoid Liu's gaze. When their eyes met, he could not read any emotions from the other's eyes. The Jedi apprentice could not help but sigh in his heart at the strong will of the Silver Leader. It must be useless to use mind control on such a person. But then, he did not need the help of mind control because he had already chosen to be honest. Sin exhaled lightly and said to Liu and Nan Wuiao, I'm an envoy from the Republic, and I'm here to investigate Nan Hela's death. Ah. Nan Wuiao could not help but let out a low cry, but she quickly controlled her emotions. Liu smiled as expected. You look handsome, but you do things without leaving room for others. I have strongly hinted that I don't want to hear your true identity, but you still want to tell it. Sin said, the whole Li knows that I'm a Jedi apprentice. What's the point of hiding it? You still don't know enough about the power of Kyankan group. If the upper level wants to control the news, it only takes one day for the word Jedi apprentice to become a new infectious disease, and the wanted Jedi apprentice will become a daily epidemic prevention work. In fact, I suspect that the truth no longer exists in Li now. Sin tried to think about the morality of professional media people who spread the truth in Li, and had to admit that Liu's statement was really reasonable. Moreover, your identity is simply a burden to the current situation. Drag? Sin was a little surprised by this statement, but before he could ask any more questions, he was interrupted by Nan Wuiao. Sin, have you and the Jedi Master found anything? Liu shrugged and gave the conversation to his employer, but the teasing on his face showed that he was not optimistic about the outcome of the conversation between Sin and Nan Wuiao. Sin thought for a while and simply stated all the clues he had collected so far. From the clues he and his master found in the manor, to the subsequent knowledge of the Kyankan group's scale clause through the Red Apricot team, to the series of adventures of Li. Countless fragmentary clues were connected by a vague logic, leading to an obvious result. However, when he finished talking about his findings, he found that Nan Wuiao showed an obvious disappointment. Is this your conclusion? The Kyankan group is conducting cruel human experiments, and my father was assassinated because he was involved in this matter? Sin said, I don't have any conclusions or judgments, only clues. But, Nan Wuiao sighed, I know. Thank you for your hard work in investigating during this period. The disappointment was obvious at a glance, which made Sin feel helpless. Of course, he knew how incomplete his clues were. The sources of information were all unreliable people like industrial doctors and slum kings, which were far from the truth. Even Nan Wuiao had much more detailed and richer information than him. However, from the perspective of a Jedi apprentice, since he separated from his master, he had no time to take care of himself, so how could he have the opportunity to investigate the truth in depth? If he hadn't had some unexpected gains in leaving, he would probably still be confused about Nan Hela's death. Of course, these complaints were meaningless to the daughter of the victim, so Sin could only say with shame, I'm really sorry for my limited ability. No need to apologize. You are also dragged down by my family's affairs. By the way, have you contacted Mostima? Sin was even more disappointed. Unfortunately, I didn't find any chance at all. Liu added, not to mention him, even I didn't find any chance. The Jedi Master seems to be completely isolated from communication and outsiders can't contact him at all. Scene was surprised. Have you looked for my master? Nonsense. If I don't look for her, do you really count on you, a useless apprentice? Liu was merciless. Do you think I don't know about the private contact with Mostima on the silver? Scene side. Sure enough, you know. That was my spaceship after all. I don't even know what the people on the spaceship did when they were connected to the internet, so my internet fee was wasted. Liu sneered. Although the news of the GD master and apprentice being under house arrest was strictly blocked at the time, as long as you were interested, you could still find out a thing or two, and I also met the master once at the time. Meet once. When the master used the force to grab the spaceship, I was cheering for her from behind. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.